Trapped in an S-rank dungeon with no supplies and all his allies dead, this guy simply decides to accept the end and jump. But at the exact moment of death, a system appears saying he has successfully died 100 times and has now unlocked resurrection. And the more he seeks his own death, the more rewards he gets. So he goes back to the past, inside a classroom, but this time with a completely absurd goal: dying to become stronger. So he starts testing the system in the most insane way possible, provoking the teacher, getting punished, causing chaos and earning points for it. And if you're ready for this series, get ready because the video is about to start. The protagonist looks ahead and realizes that there is nothing left to be done, because this time he truly made a huge miscalculation and all of his supplies have been completely exhausted. In addition, all of his companions have already fallen. This time he is completely trapped in a desperate situation, but this was already expected. The difficulty of an S-rank dungeon seems a bit too exaggerated. He takes out his phone and listens to the message his friend had sent. The message says that if he is hearing that recording, then his friend is probably no longer in that world. But once the protagonist had told him that he could make a request, so he would like to ask, the protagonist stops the audio and, with a smile on his face, apologizes to his friend, saying that this time he will have to go back on his word, and if by chance they meet in another world, then his friend can punish him properly. He jumps from the platform, thinking that he can finally end that long and endless game. But compared to the punishment of hiding there and dying slowly, he prefers to maintain his position as a chaotic and glorious mess. But before he falls, a system appears saying that the host has been detected. He has successfully died 100 times and has successfully activated the rebirth system bound to the host Wei Chen. The protagonist, a little confused, questions what is happening, since he should already have been eliminated by exhaustion against the monsters from the previous battle. The system says that it has some rules, and explains that every time the host successfully seeks death, death-seeking points will be granted. After he accumulates a certain number of points, the host will have the chance to be reborn. And after each rebirth, the host will receive various generous rewards. So now he can boldly rise to the peak of life. After hearing all the explanations, the protagonist becomes even more confused, questioning what the rebirth system is and what is really happening to him. For a moment, he is so confused that he thinks he is hallucinating from reading too many manhwas, but suddenly he hears something, and the system warns that in order to obtain more system content, he must unlock it himself. Since the rebirth system has been activated for the first time, the host will be transported to a point in the past. But the protagonist panics because he did not want that and emphasizes that this is not right because he should have already been eliminated from that damned endless game. Suddenly he is teleported and appears sitting on a chair. He still had many questions to ask, but now it was too late. When he looks ahead, he realizes that he is inside a classroom and cannot believe that he has truly been reborn in the past, and he questions whether that place is a university classroom. The teacher looks at him and asks what kind of question he just said he had for her. Chen begins to smile, thinking that he can really earn system points simply by seeking death, and he ends up agreeing, saying that in the end it does not matter because he needs to try it first. And since he gains rewards by seeking his own elimination, he asks the teacher a bold question, leaving her irritated. She points out that he has already gone too far and tells him to leave the classroom. The system recognizes this and congratulates him, giving him 10 system points. That makes him understand that the rebirth system really exists. And when he looks at the date on his phone, he realizes that he has returned to April 13th, which means that the data collapse incident is about to begin. Outside, he continues looking at his phone, saying that he has just been reborn and wondering if he really cannot have at least a moment to breathe peacefully. On that day, exactly at noon, a strange catastrophe descended upon Earth. Countless humans were suddenly and inexplicably sucked into another dimension. The bodies of some people suddenly began to be digitized, and those humans pulled to another place were forced to go through various adventures and games. Those who passed the games received many rewards, such as weapons and items, some even receiving powerful abilities. But those who failed the games disappeared forever, not even leaving a body behind, because the connection established on that day would never end, being infinite and unlimited. That disaster also became known as the Infinite Collapse, but now he feels a little more confident, since this time he had the chance to be reborn and even gained a system. Because of that, he must now become stronger and protect those around him with all his effort. While he was talking to himself outside, the teacher, still irritated, walks over to him and throws a book at his head, asking what he is muttering about by himself because apparently he is not reflecting on what he just did. Chen fixes his hair and, with a charming voice, approaches the teacher, saying that in fact he had been reflecting all this time and that there were so many chances to seek death that he did not properly take advantage of them, so he does not want to waste any more time in his life. The two kiss, and he pushes her away, thanking her for the treat. The system congratulates him again, and this time, he receives 30 points. The teacher, a little confused about what just happened, asks if he really knows what he is doing. The protagonist says that soon she will know exactly why he did that and emphasizes that the game has already begun. He walks over to one of the people trying to discover who the unlucky guys were that suffered the first mutation. The man, a little irritated at being stared at, asks what kind of nonsense he is talking about and threatens the protagonist, saying that he will suffer a great punishment. But while staring at the man, he notices a mark on his neck and remembers that this is exactly what the mutations have. The man, still irritated, asks again what he is talking about and what those mutations are, but the protagonist simply punches him in the face, knocking him unconscious. All the other students become frightened and ask what he just did. The teacher makes a call saying that she's from the university and explains that a violent accident occurred, asking them to send people immediately. Chen holds a piece of wood in his hand and thinks that when the collapse begins, a random portion of humanity will turn into zombies. They must deal with these people before they become fully zombified, so that nothing like that happens again. Some girls, frightened by that, begin talking among themselves. The blonde says that she heard the protagonist's girlfriend had cheated on him, and maybe that is why he went crazy. But the other girl thinks that story is a little strange, and asks why he would talk about something like that. With a smile on his face, the protagonist suddenly remembers that he had just been dumped by his ex-girlfriend named Qin Huan. The protagonist walks over to the two of them and asks Lu Ju how he dares to hold another man's girlfriend like that. Lu Ju replies that she is no longer his girlfriend because they broke up a long time ago and tells him to stop acting recklessly. Chen explains that he was not talking about himself, but about the vice president of the basketball club, the student council president, and that handsome guy at the cyber cafe near the entrance. He tells her that she has so many boyfriends that she can barely count them. Huan, irritated, asks how he dares insult her innocence. The protagonist says that if that is really a lie and he is making it up, then she should simply let her new boyfriend check the hotel records from that month. Lu Ju throws her aside, completely furious. With a pitiful face, she asks if he really does not trust her. Lu Ju, already suspicious of the situation, asks if what the protagonist said is true and says that he wants to check the hotel records immediately. The system recognizes that as an achievement and gives him 40 points. And when the points reach 100, an opportunity for rebirth will be activated, and after that, when the host is eliminated, he will receive certain rewards. Chen thinks that apparently the more severely someone seeks death, and the more others hate him, the more points he earns. Suddenly, he realizes something and shouts that he found it. Meanwhile, Huan and Lu Ju were arguing, and she admits that she went to the hotel with other men but begs for her life. The two are frightened, but the protagonist walks right past them and strikes a female student behind them, eliminating her. He apologizes to her and asks her to rest in peace, but if he had not eliminated her there, more people would suffer. He looks at the rest of the students because he remembers that there were 3 mutated people there, and now he still needs to find the last one. Suddenly, a woman arrives asking who called the police, but thinks they must be confusing the uniform because that way criminals will commit more crimes. She continues asking what exactly is happening there. The teacher walks up to the police officer and shouts, saying that that boy named Wei Chen suddenly went crazy and eliminated 2 students in a row. But the protagonist recognizes the woman and calls her by name. Xingxi draws her gun and asks who exactly he is and how he knows her name. He tries to approach, but she shouts for him not to come any closer. Chen explains that she does not know him yet, but it is great that she is not dead. He continues approaching and she panics and fires the gun. The protagonist falls to the ground lifeless. And frightened, she says that now is not the time to be afraid because if she had done nothing, that lunatic could have hurt more people. But suddenly his body begins to disappear and everyone becomes terrified, asking what is happening and whether that is even possible or if it is a dream. Suddenly he begins to appear again and the system says that the rebirth was successful, and as a reward for the first rebirth, the host will receive a newbie death-seeking combo package. He obtained a beginner storage ring that can currently contain 1 cubic meter of non-living matter. He also received the mutilated celestial and earth-lacking scriptures and the mutilated earth and heaven-lacking scriptures, an A-grade cultivation method. In addition, he also obtained 3 small life-extending pills. With a satisfied smile, he thinks that he truly has been reborn and has even received many good things to start with. Xingxi, frightened by that situation, stands up and grabs her gun again, shouting and asking what exactly just happened. The protagonist holds her by the waist while she asks if he really did not die. Chen tells her that she is still as impulsive as before, but that is exactly why he likes her. Xingxi still does not understand and asks what he is doing, telling him to let go of her because that is assaulting an officer. Suddenly something appears on the TV greeting everyone, introducing itself as Gigi and saying that the long-awaited data collapse game is about to begin, and if they like death, corpses, torn limbs, and punishments, they will enjoy the time to come. In addition, he emphasizes that the first game will probably eliminate 70% of humanity, and if they want to survive, then they must work as hard as possible. Both the teacher and the students are frightened because That television should have been broken. Xingxi asks what is happening, and the protagonist says that it is finally about to begin and that it is definitely just like before. That idiotic penguin is the same. Suddenly, one of the female students starts screaming and the others ask if she is okay. The protagonist realizes that he had forgotten one and shouts for everyone to stay away from her because she is about to mutate. However, one of the people becomes angry with the protagonist and tells him to stop talking nonsense because that is his girlfriend. However, the woman who had mutated suddenly attacks her boyfriend and eliminates him in front of everyone. Chen quickly grabs the police officer's gun and fires at the woman, but it does nothing. He thinks that she was not eliminated even after taking several shots, which means she must not be a common mutant, and unfortunately with his current strength, he cannot deal with her. He shouts to the others that they are not dreaming and that it is not a hallucination, so if they want to keep their lives, they must run away immediately. He hands the gun back to the police officer, asking her this time not to be eliminated so easily. He pulls her along and says goodbye in an elegant way, saying that he had already expected that and that she is still as soft and elastic as before. Slightly embarrassed, she asks what he is doing and says that if he does not remove his hand from there, he will be punished within 30 minutes. But he simply ignores her and walks away, leaving her even more nervous. He goes to the mutant and throws a book at her, saying that the person who just shot her is right there, so she should just go get him. The mutant runs toward them, but he simply steps aside and makes her fall from the top of the building. The system announces that he eliminated an enemy and gained 500 experience points. He realizes that with so much experience, it means she truly was not an ordinary person. However, he still finds the situation a bit strange and looks back, wondering why that guy remained so calm in that situation. He notices that the man was trying to attack the police officer from behind and quickly rushes forward and punches him, saving her. He tells her not to stand there and grabs her hand, pulling her outside the room. Outside, the chaos had already begun. The game announces that he has the mission of persistence. He must survive for 72 hours, the difficulty is D, and the reward for completing it is 2,000 experience points, with 71 hours and 23 minutes remaining. He continues running while dragging the police officer, saying that if she does not want to be eliminated there, she must follow him. The teacher, the cheating girlfriend, and the new cook were also desperately trying to run. Xingxi, still unable to believe everything that was happening, begins asking herself why those unbelievable things were occurring. The teacher tries to help as many students as possible, telling them to run in another direction because the wall was about to collapse. Xingxi continues wondering why she unconsciously chose to follow that man without any reason and without even knowing him. The wall collapses, and one of the female students becomes trapped, begging for help. The teacher runs to her and grabs her arm, telling her not to be afraid because she will get her out. The protagonist tells the teacher that unfortunately the girl cannot be saved and asks them to leave quickly. The others, completely desperate, simply ignore the injured people, saying they must get out of there immediately. But the teacher, convinced of what must be done, thinks that everything is a joke and that she is the teacher, so she cannot abandon her students. She tries to pull the girl with all her strength, but the girl only screams in pain because she is trapped under the wall. Chen grabs the girl's arm and tells the teacher that she really is very impulsive, so he will help her pull the girl out together. The girl keeps begging the teacher to help her because she is in terrible pain. With the protagonist's help, they try again, and finally the girl is pulled free. The teacher is relieved and says that now they can take her to the medical center, but when she looks down, she realizes that the girl had lost half of her body. Even so, she opens her eyes and tries to bite the teacher, and the protagonist grabs her head and eliminates her. However, the teacher collapses on the ground, saying she is in great pain. Another side mission appears, telling him that he must save the teacher, and the reward is 100 death-seeking points. Chen looks at the teacher and tells the system that she was already bitten by a zombie. So, in order to save her, he will have to make a huge sacrifice, and apparently that is definitely a complete act of death-seeking, which explains why the reward is so high. He prepares to save her and remembers the saying that you cannot catch a wolf without sacrificing a child, and you cannot catch a bandit without sacrificing your wife. He looks at her chest and says that since he is already seeking death, he must go all the way. He takes one of his pills and gives it to the teacher. That small, life-extending pill has some healing and detoxifying effects. With it, he can delay the development of the poison in her body. Then he must suck the poison from the wound on the teacher. He apologizes but explains that it is an emergency and deserves forgiveness. The police officer becomes jealous and asks what he is doing, questioning whether he really has so much time to do shameful things. Chen tells her not to misunderstand, because he is only helping to suck out the toxins transferred by the zombie. Although he cannot completely cure her, he can buy some time. Xingxi becomes confused and asks that if he does, that he might also become infected with the virus. But the protagonist says that is not true, and explains that the zombie virus only spreads through wounds, so even if he swallows the poison, there will be no problem as long as there are no wounds in his mouth, such as canker sores. After hearing all those explanations, the police officer becomes confused and asks who the protagonist really is and why he knows so much about this change. Feeling like a true protagonist, he says that when the right time comes, he will explain everything properly to her. But for now, they need to find a safe place to stay. While tying the teacher to prevent her from losing control, he says that everyone there was very lucky because if he had not eliminated 2 zombies before they transformed, everyone there would probably have had only a small chance of escaping. Lu Ju, also confused by the situation, asks the protagonist why he knows so much, and also wants to know why zombies exist and why virtual words appear before their eyes. The others, also curious, ask what instance search means exactly, besides not understanding the experience points and wondering whether they are inside a video game. A somewhat larger man raises his hand saying that he already knows everything. He explains that he has read many Infinite Flow novels and that as long as they eliminate monsters and complete missions, they will become powerful experts. With a smile on his face, the protagonist tells him that he advises him not to think like that because the current situation is not exactly like the Infinite Flow novels he read. The others become irritated and ask why the protagonist is showing off so much. Chen emphasizes that this is not a game and that they only have one life. At the moment, they are just a group of novices without upgrades and without combat power. So it is better to simply cling to life and try to keep it. As there is always a bully among everyone, Lu Ju rushes at the protagonist saying that he has practiced martial arts for several years and will show who the real idiot is there. However, the protagonist easily restrains him and says that his flashy moves can probably only fool those foolish and empty-headed women. The protagonist is pleased and thinks that although his level has been reset, his basic combat instincts are still intact. Juan asks if her ex-boyfriend really called her stupid, but her biggest doubt is when he became so strong, since when they were dating he was clearly a coward. Chen holds the teacher in his arms and tells Xingxi that he needs to go to the room to help the teacher expel the zombie poison. Therefore, he wants her to stand guard outside and not let anyone enter to disturb him. Xingxi agrees, although she thinks it is very strange because subconsciously she agreed with him without thinking. Lu Ju calls the officer and says that the protagonist definitely knows some secrets, so there might be something hidden inside the hall, therefore he also wants to enter. But Xingxi draws her gun and says that unfortunately she cannot let anyone enter. Even though the situation is very complicated, she will trust him. Inside the hall, the teacher was already starting to lose control. The protagonist says that she is not evolving so fast and that there is still some time before she completely transforms. He removes his clothes and apologizes to her, but to save her life, he needs to do that. The mutilated celestial and earth-lacking scripture is a very peculiar cultivation method. Although its effects are powerful, it cannot be cultivated through normal methods. The effect is that every level increase grants the practitioner a new ability. The cultivation method cannot be cultivated independently. Practitioners gain cultivation experience by enduring damage and pain. The stronger the intensity, the greater the experience gained. Self-harm or friendly fire cannot increase experience. In short, it is a cultivation method for masochists who love pain. So, he offers his body to the teacher and only the sounds can be heard outside. Xingxi again feels a little jealous and asks what he is doing in there. As the protagonist feels pain, the system notifies that the experience of the mutilated celestial has increased. However, he is being bitten so many times that he realizes that if he does not level up quickly, he will end up turning into a zombie. But he does not want to waste the chance of rebirth so easily. Suddenly, he realizes that he leveled up. The system says that he reached level 1 and obtained the ability Invincible Bloodline. His blood produces healing and antitoxin effects, greatly increasing self-healing ability and resistance to most toxins. Because of that, the teacher who is biting him is affected by the healing and begins to return to normal. He thinks that this was expected. The teacher ingested his blood and the Invincible Bloodline is also working inside her body. He collapses on the floor saying that unfortunately, he cannot continue because he spent too much energy and needs to rest. Now that the teacher is fine, he can relax a little. However, the teacher begins acting a little strange and says that that is still not enough and that she wants more. The protagonist tries to stop her saying that she cannot go down that path, but she continues trying. The system warns that consuming the Invincible Bloodline may lead to unpredictable consequences, so it must be used carefully. He complains that this kind of warning should have been given before he used the ability. Sometime later, the system announces that the mission was completed. He managed to save the teacher and received his 100 reward points. While the teacher rested after a long period of effort, the protagonist was depressed, thinking that his innocence had been corrupted. Outside, Lu Ju continued causing trouble, accusing the protagonist and saying that an hour had already passed and any poison should have disappeared by now. And there is probably a secret room inside and that coward escaped alone. The others also begin to suspect, saying that they were probably doing something shady inside or maybe there are hidden supplies there. Xingxi was beginning to worry, wondering what he was doing because things outside were starting to get out of control and could not be suppressed for long. Lu Ju touches an iron bar and grabs it in his hand, telling all the students to enter together because he does not believe that the officer would shoot them. Suddenly, something begins banging on the door and everyone becomes frightened. An extremely strong zombie breaks the door down. That is the sports teacher, a level D zombie. A sports teacher infected with the zombie virus, full of resentment toward the teachers of basic subjects who constantly took over his classes. His hobbies include eating raw eggs and admiring girls. He shouts for everyone to come to class but stares directly at the girls. Xingxi tries to stop him, but her shots have no effect, and she shouts that they have a big problem. Suddenly, the protagonist strikes the monster and throws it far away, apologizing for the delay and saying he made her wait too long. Seeing him shirtless and overflowing with confidence, she's momentarily fascinated, but the feeling quickly disappears. She tells him to wait and angrily asks what happened to all those bite marks on his back, and again questions what they did inside that room. The protagonist explains that it was just a normal detoxification process and asks if she wants him to detoxify her too if she gets bitten. She replies that there is no chance of that happening. The system recognizes that as death-seeking and rewards him with 40 points. The zombies that entered along with the sports teacher begin attacking everyone, who panic and beg for help. Chen grabs the officer's gun, saying that it is an emergency and he needs help. She shouts for him to wait because the gun had no bullets. He grabs her again and she, embarrassed, asks what he is doing. The protagonist pulls out the spare ammunition and says that he already knew she kept it there. The system rewards him with another 50 points. Xingxi, still embarrassed, asks how that man knows so much about her without even knowing her. The sports teacher begins to stand up and shouts for everyone to do sit-ups. He grabs Huan, who begs for help while her clothes are torn. Lu Ju, terrified, simply runs away, saying there is nothing he can do. The teacher continues trying to grab the girl, but Chen rescues her and puts the gun in the monster's mouth, saying he has something very good for him to put in his mouth. After eliminating the sports teacher, the protagonist gains 800 experience points and rises to level 2. He thinks that leveling up can improve physical qualities, so one of the most important things at that moment is to level up as quickly as possible. To do that, he hunts down all the zombies inside, gaining a total of 400 points. In addition, the system gives him another 50 points for death-seeking. After eliminating all the monsters inside, he says that his showtime has come to an end. Everyone is impressed. Juan says that even if the protagonist is handsome, she still wants to punch him. He notices a book floating in the air but finds it a little strange and wonders whether monsters can really drop skill books. As soon as he picks it up, he realizes that it is a D-grade book called Sure Shot. Its effect can only be used with firearms and fires a surprisingly powerful shot that hits the enemy's head. But if it hits other parts of the body, it only causes normal damage. He thinks that is a pity because it is not suitable for him, and he gives it to Xingxi, telling her that it is for her and she only needs to click to confirm in order to use it. Another side mission appears saying that he must save his classmates, and the reward after the instance will be 30 points for each surviving classmate. Xingxi looks at the book asking what it is, but the protagonist is happy because he obtained another troublesome mission. Originally, he only needed to find a small amount of suffering, but now he needs to help everyone survive. He says that he will go out to search for food and water for everyone and ask them to stay there and reinforce the gate, because there should not be any other monster capable of invading that place again. Lu Ju approaches him and the protagonist asks if he has any opinion, but Lu Ju says it is nothing because he never imagined that he would be so incredible. So he sincerely asks the protagonist not to take seriously anything he might have said in the past to offend him. Chen thinks that Lu Ju knows very well how to play with the wind, so he must be a little careful with him. He says that at a critical moment like that, everyone should work together, so he needs to forget the past. In addition, he points out that the teacher is still recovering, so none of them should disturb her in any way. And he asks them not to make noise because he is going out to find some supplies and will return as quickly as possible. Xingxi steps in front of him, saying that she wants to go too, because as a police officer who serves her people, she cannot let the protagonist risk his life alone. He gains another 40 points and remembers his past life, because she did the same thing back then. He hugs her and asks if she is falling in love with him. Embarrassed by the situation, she asks if he is really looking for death, and questions whether he truly thinks she does not have the courage to shoot him. But the protagonist says that if she is not afraid of attracting more monsters, she can go ahead and shoot and make noise. She simply goes quiet, saying that he is far too audacious. Lu Ju takes advantage of the calmer situation and goes to his girlfriend, saying that unfortunately he was a little slow to react earlier, but since she must be very scared, she can run straight into his arms. Juan slaps him across the face and ends the relationship right there. Outside the gym, the zombies had already completely taken over the area, and when the two of them look ahead, they see some zombies devouring a corpse. Xingxi grabs the protagonist's shirt and he asks if she's scared. Frightened by the situation, she asks if he's not scared at all, because the current situation is like a horror movie. Chen explains that unfortunately this is only the beginning of the nightmare, and even more terrifying things are still to come. He takes her hand and kisses it, saying that this time he will definitely do the impossible to protect her. Inside a cafeteria, some zombies were there grabbing food. Chen and Xingxi were trying to pass unnoticed, but he sees something that looks far too perfect and ends up touching it. The system interprets that as seeking death and gives him 50 points. Startled, she makes a bit of noise and the zombies look toward the sound. The protagonist covers her mouth, saying that she almost got them both caught. However, she asks him who gave him permission to touch anything. Chen tries to smooth things over by saying that she's still far too unprepared, because he was only trying to test her ability to react in sudden situations. But if she wants, he can put an end to things right there, and he apologizes. She tells him to stop being so dramatic. Sometime later, they manage to slip past all of them without being noticed until they reach a supermarket. He points out that there should not be any zombies there, but she's surprised to see that there is a supermarket in that place. Chen explains that it is the supermarket inside the cafeteria and that they can grab enough supplies and leave immediately. Xingxi runs over and grabs a cake, saying that it looks delicious, but the protagonist tells her not to worry about things that are difficult to carry or store. He takes the cake from her hands and tells her to grab more bottled water and compact biscuits instead. But what he did not know was that a man can do anything, touch things he should not. But taking food from a woman is asking for death. With a serious look, she grabs him and tells him to give it back immediately, shaking him from side to side. He loses his balance and drops the cake all over her. A strawberry gets stuck between her breasts, and she says that it is disgusting and sticky. But the protagonist picks up the strawberry and gets ready to eat it. However, she slaps him so hard that he nearly ends up being reborn again. He remembers that he had forgotten that this girl is a true food lover and is usually a good person. But whenever she sees good food, she cannot control herself. Irritated about losing the cake, she starts grabbing the biscuits and complains that she is annoyed. But suddenly she smells something delicious and realizes it is coming from behind a door. She walks over to see what it is and notices that behind the supermarket is the cafeteria kitchen. She realizes that the smell is coming from a cauldron, and as the scent grows stronger, she notices that it is meat, though she has never smelled anything like it before. Just as she is about to open it, the protagonist walks into the room and tells her not to do it, but it is already too late. The moment she looks inside the cauldron, she realizes that they are the remains of other people. Suddenly, another zombie opens the door. That is the cafeteria butcher, a level C zombie. He is a cafeteria butcher infected with the zombie virus. Slaughtering animals can no longer satisfy his desires, and his craving for human flesh has driven him insane. The butcher tries to attack, but the protagonist moves quickly to save his companion. He tells her to get up quickly, but he is grabbed by the legs and thrown into the pot. He complains that the place is too hot, but the butcher covers the pot and raises the fire even higher. Xingxi panics, asking how he could give up his life to protect her. But suddenly the protagonist appears behind her, and the system says that he lost 200 points for courting death and that the resurrection was successful. Because of that, he receives a resurrection reward, and the host has obtained the special skill Zombie Taming Art Level 1. The skill allows him to control corpses or undead creatures through physical contact. The higher the skill level, the more creatures he can control at the same time. He says that she is crying a little too early, and even without understanding, she asks if he really was reborn. But the protagonist charges at his opponent, saying that he will explain everything later, because right now he needs to deal with that guy. As soon as he activates the skill to try to control the butcher, the system warns that the estimated taming time is 30 seconds, and that if he moves away from the target before that time ends, the skill will be cancelled. Xingxi asks how she is supposed to distract that guy, so she needs to think of something. He runs to the zombie's back and grabs him, while telling her that she is very smart, so she will definitely think of something. The zombie struggles with all his might to break free. She begins thinking about what she should do and remembers that the monster's description said that he was interested in human flesh. So if that is what attracts him, she needs to show a little more. She loosens her clothes a little and starts jumping, telling the zombie that there is fresh meat over there. Both the protagonist and the zombie stare at those wonderful things, and soon the zombie starts walking toward her, saying that he needs to get them. Frightened, she closes her eyes, but the protagonist calls out to her, asking her to admire how incredible he is. Impressed, she asks if he really was able to control that thing. The system confirms that the butcher has been successfully tamed, and because of that, the protagonist gains 1,000 experience points, raising his level to 3. To show off his control, he snaps his fingers and tells the butcher to strike a nice pose for the police officer. But she finds it disgusting and he gets upset. She walks over to him and asks what is going on, why he can revive, and why he can control that guy. But the protagonist cannot concentrate and says that he will explain all of it later. But if she really wants to keep having a visual conversation, then she needs to cover herself up. She tries to explain, saying that she only did that to save him, and that she does not have those strange thoughts. After covering herself, she asks if now he can explain those secrets. The protagonist tries to explain, saying that they are inside a game and that he was lucky enough to have already played that game before. As for reviving and controlling zombies, those were just rewards obtained by triggering the right conditions inside the game. The police officer says that she does not completely understand what he is saying, but that is not the most important thing right now, because the most urgent task is to bring the supplies back to the others. Chen tells her not to worry about that because they can catch a ride. He loads the supplies into a shopping cart and tells his new pet to pull it. Xingxi is frightened and says that it is more dangerous than them simply walking, and asks if he wants to die again. But by challenging death once again, he earns 50 experience points. He looks back and she notices, asking what he is looking at, but he simply smiles and says that in youth, one must protect death a little, and he points out that she should not move because they are about to take a fast turn. They manage to get out of that place. Outside, he thanks the butcher because if it were not for him, he would have wasted a lot of time. The butcher, to thank his master, extends his hand with a knife, and the protagonist asks if that is really for him. It is a level C boning knife that has the effect of increasing damage to flesh by 10%. It is the butcher's precious boning knife, which cuts meat as if it were mud. The protagonist thanks him, saying that he will make good use of it. The two say goodbye, and the protagonist tells the butcher to remember to eat on time and eat more zombies and fewer humans. Xingxi starts dragging him inside, saying that he is being too disgusting and that it is time to stop that. Back inside, the protagonist puts all the food on the floor and starts dividing it, saying that it will last for quite a while. Each person should take their share, and if anyone tries to be dishonest, then they cannot blame him for being a little rude. Chen hands food to Lu Ju and asks why he is not taking a portion for Huan. He tries to smooth it over by saying that he preferred to break things off, since the protagonist and she seemed to suit each other better. However, she was sitting in the corner of the room, hungry and alone, saying that she would rather starve than shamelessly go to him and ask for food. But Chen walks over to her and gives her some water, saying that this is not the time to be in a bad mood, since surviving is the most important thing. She is surprised and tells him that she treated him insensitively, asking whether he regrets ever knowing her. The protagonist says that it is fine and that past mistakes should stay in the past. In addition, he points out that right now, he already has someone more important in his life. Huan is shocked to hear those words, especially the part about him having someone more important. As he was walking back, Xingxi walks up to him angrily and asks where he went again to relax. He laughs and says that he just went to the bathroom. Seeing that scene, Huan refuses to believe that he has really given up on her. And during the night, while they sleep, Xingxi rolls over and slaps him across the face. Since he was already awake, he decides to go to the bathroom to relieve himself. And while he is washing his hands, Huan enters the bathroom and starts taking off her clothes. Surprised by that behavior, he asks what she is doing there, but she simply approaches and asks if she is not beautiful. Chen points out that if she were not so beautiful, he would not have gone through so much trouble trying to stay by her side. Huan starts looking at him and says that it is true that she always liked him. However, he used to be a useless person who basically did nothing, and she always liked strong men, exactly the way he is now. The protagonist realizes that the situation is very dangerous, and that because of that, she is trying to please him so that he will protect her. And if that is the case, he will not hold back. He grabs her by the arm and shoves her against the wall, tying her hands with tape. She braces herself and says that it is the first time he has tried that kind of game, but she wants him to be gentle. With a smile on his face, the protagonist grabs more tape and says that he will indeed be very gentle, covering her mouth. Because of that, he gains 30 system points. He points out that now she can stay there and play by herself, and that when he wakes up tomorrow morning, he might remember to go there and rescue her. But if he forgets, then she will have to start praying for herself. She becomes desperate and he leans close to her, saying that she is beautiful, but that the teacher and the police officer are far more attractive, and asks if she really thinks she is such a valuable commodity. Because of that, he gains another 40 points. He notices that she has become even more frightened, but tells her not to be afraid because the zombies cannot get in there. But suddenly, the teacher appears at the bathroom entrance and leaps to grab the protagonist. He thinks that although the bloodline prevented the teacher from turning into a zombie, her mind seems to have been affected by the virus. She keeps trying, and he thinks that with his new zombie taming ability, he might be able to control her. However, she is far too strong, and there is no way he can suppress her. But as soon as she bites him and starts drinking his blood, he notices that she begins to calm down, which shows that she is simply addicted to his blood. He decides to let it continue, since in that way she stays still, and his hope is that he can tame her before his blood runs out. Over time, the system says that he has successfully tamed her and gained 1,200 experience points, rising to level 4. But that cost him basically all of his blood and left him with almost no energy. The next day, early in the morning, Xingxi wakes up happily, saying that she finally had a good rest. On the other hand, the protagonist looked like he was practically dead. The police officer looks at him and notices that the teacher is lying beside him, and she gets angry with the gun in her hand, wondering if he has turned into a zombie. Chen asks her to wait, saying that he will recover. Xingxi asks what happened to the teacher. The protagonist explains that now she is still a little aggressive. Her name is Ouyang Shi, a level 5 half-zombie race, with the abilities Zombie Claw Return and Devour. The protagonist points out that for now he can only use zombie taming art to control her, since her body has been strengthened by the virus, and she can become a very important help in the future. In addition, he notices that her clothes are already basically falling apart, so he needs to use his points to buy new clothes for her. He chooses an outfit saying that it is very good, since the stats are decent. That outfit is level D and has the effect of increasing agility by 5%. It is a battlesuit made of special leather. Not only is it durable, but also light and comfortable. And in addition, it is very pleasing to the eye. Currently, it is not recommended for male equipment. As soon as he puts the outfit on her, he asks the police officer whether he does not have excellent taste, but she says that he is a total pervert. All the boys who were there are left stunned by the teacher. The protagonist explains that the teacher had been infected with the zombie virus, but thanks to his treatment, she returned to normal, and her physique even grew stronger. He throws an iron bar, and she jumps to catch it, holds it in her mouth, and quickly returns to him like a pet dog. He is stunned because he never told her to bring it back. Everyone starts cheering, saying that the protagonist actually managed to train the teacher as his pet. Juan ends up realizing that this is not what she thought it would be. Suddenly, the larger boy returns, shouting that the situation is bad because there are many zombies gathering outside. The protagonist looks through the window and notices that there really are several zombies there. Xingxi also examines the situation and says that apparently they have no intention of attacking the academy, but she does not know why they are gathering there. Chen explains that although those zombies have no awareness, they are all controlled by that game, and the academy is probably no longer safe. He goes back and gathers everyone, saying that the place will probably be attacked soon. Lu Ju starts praising the protagonist, saying that he is amazing, so if the zombies manage to get in, then he will probably be able to defeat them all and protect everyone. Chen explains that this is basically impossible because with his strength alone, he will not be able to protect everyone, so he hopes that they can all cooperate. The people begin to panic, asking whether this is some kind of joke, because if they are accidentally bitten, that will be the end. Chen shows them a flask, saying that it is the inhibitor he used to treat the teacher's zombie virus, and that if any of them are bitten, they just need to use it quickly. In addition, he says that he will teach them some simple combat techniques, and that they will definitely be more than enough to deal with those low-level zombies. Xingxi realizes that it is the protagonist's blood, so that is why his face was pale in the morning, since he probably drew a lot of blood on purpose. Chen starts laughing and raises his middle finger, asking whether they are men or not. For provoking the crowd, he gains 70 system points. The protagonist points out that he will not force anyone, and that anyone among them who wants to loudly say 3 times that he is not a man will be excused from the fight. As expected, the teenagers with their masculinity on edge get irritated and say that he has gone too far and ask who exactly he is calling not a man. But Chen goes even further and continues provoking them, saying that when real danger appears, all they know how to do is hide behind others and beg for their lives like dogs. The overweight boy raises his hand and says that he is willing to fight with the protagonist because he does not want to be looked down on anymore, and in any case, since he might die anyway, it is better to give everything he has. Because of that, the others say that they do not want to be looked down on either, and if even Xiao Peng has the courage to do something, then they also need to act. The will to fight starts spreading among them, and all the men present step forward and say that they will fight with everything they have. Xingxi is impressed, realizing that it is true that the protagonist used provocation to awaken everyone's fighting spirit. But Lu Ju raises his hand and, trembling in fear, repeats 3 times that he is not a man so that he can be excused. The protagonist tells him that it is fine and points out that the men will protect him and the girls. And to provoke him even more, Chen takes the lead and says that all real men who protect those they love should follow him. Quickly, all of them grab their weapons, but the people are confused, asking why the school gym has such dangerous items. In addition, they do not seem to be of a high quality. But the truth is that those are the cheapest items the protagonist could find in the shop, and he had to spend 200 points. He gets everyone's attention and points out that they do not have much time to train, so he can only teach them some of the most basic moves. And he starts explaining some basic techniques, saying that if they can master at least 3 or 4 moves, that will already be enough to deal with those zombies without problems. But things were not going according to his plan. He thinks that apparently he thought about it too simply, because making those students, who often even have their physical education classes taken away, practice combat skills will not be easy. But the students continue dedicating themselves to learning with everything they have. Xingxi walks over to him and says that the blade technique he is teaching seems genuinely impressive, and says that she would also like to learn. However, the protagonist tells her that she is the only one among all of them who actually has a firearm. The police officer explains that there is no other choice since the ammunition has run out and the protagonist even took the spare bullets last time. She asks why they need to fight those zombies up close, but he says that it is fine, and when he opens his jacket, he reveals countless bullets to her, saying that he prepared everything. Impressed, she asks where he got so much ammunition and whether he is Rambo. But the truth is that one system point can be exchanged for 10 rounds of ammunition, and 500 rounds should be enough for her. He stores the ammunition again in the place where she usually keeps it and tells her not to worry about that because he has enough. But embarrassed, she hits him again, and that makes him gain 50 points. Still, that leaves her quite excited, saying that now that she has so much ammunition, she should be able to practice her shooting skills at the same time. Once again, Chen decides to help her in an enjoyable way and goes behind her, saying that the posture she uses to hold the gun is not exactly standard, and that like that she will not be able to hit the target easily. Coming even closer with a calm and focused voice, he explains that she should aim a little more carefully at the target and then fire. But she notices that his gaze is starting to lower and she punches him again. This time he gains 60 points. One of the boys walks up to the protagonist and says that he's a sellout, that he said he would teach combat techniques, but instead ran off to flirt with the girls. He runs back over and apologizes, saying that next he will teach the following step. Xingxu thinks that people really are a little strange. While they train, time passes, and now there are only 4 hours and 3 minutes left. The students continue giving it their all, and the protagonist notices that the training is having a good effect, and that apparently they will be able to handle the next battle. The game warns that the zombie horde will arrive soon, and that the players need to prepare for the next battle. A short while later, the doors knock down, and the protagonist says that the time has finally come. Among the horde of zombies appears the level C Zombie Dean. The Dean, infected with the zombie virus, likes trampling on the students' self-esteem and hates students who dare to resist him. The Dean's mere presence already causes the confidence of all the students present to drop. Chen realizes that the Dean was always dangerous and apparently the students are still afraid of him. He tries to intervene and tells everyone not to be afraid of that guy because he has already become a zombie and as long as they manage to defeat him, they will win. One of the students gets angry, thinking that the Dean always insulted all of them as trash and treated them like insignificant insects. And now, it is time to get revenge. He charges recklessly and the protagonist tries to stop him, but it is too late. The Dean counters with a single blow and throws him against the wall. The young man begins asking how the Dean can be so strong. The Dean's ability is to insult students, causing their self-esteem to drop, and as a result, their will to keep fighting weakens. Thanks to the insults, all the students begin to collapse mentally, but Yang decides to take action and lands a direct blow on the Dean, standing in front of the students and shouting that he has no right to talk to them like that. She starts coughing, and the protagonist is surprised, asking whether she managed to recover her consciousness. Embarrassed by the situation, she asks what is happening there and why she is wearing those clothes. The Dean recovers and says that since she is actually trying to resist him, she needs to be eliminated. He tries to attack her, but the protagonist blocks him. At the same time, he questions why there is a level C enemy in the starting dungeon, since with their current strength, they will not be able to deal with that. The only option is to use his secret weapon. He shouts to the teacher that her body has been strengthened, so they need to fight together, but she looks confused and asks what he is talking about because she has no idea how to fight. Chen realizes that although she recovered her consciousness, that made her lose her battle instincts. While that is happening, the police officer fires, landing a sure shot on the Dean, but that shot is not enough to stop him. The Dean tries to attack the teacher, but the protagonist jumps in front of her and blocks the attack. Chen realizes that the Dean's strength is tremendous, so they need to make the teacher enter the zombie state again. He shoves her against the wall and starts insulting her, trying to make her lose control, and because of that, he gains 60 system points. He notices that she is starting to come back and thinks that due to the mental stimulation, her body has started transforming again. He keeps provoking her, saying that she's not exactly young, but loves wearing cartoon print underwear, and that the most ridiculous part is that she is still single to this day, and even on Valentine's Day, the most she can do is secretly hide inside her house. That infuriates her, and the Dean rips the knife from his arm, drawing her attention. All the anger she was feeling is directed at him, and she charges forward saying that she will kill him right there and now. Chen gets excited, saying that now they can win, but she tries to attack him too. He defends himself and apologizes for insulting her like that. However, first they need to get rid of the enemy and then settle things with each other. Xingxi says that he said many things that he should never have said to a woman, so it is normal that she is angry. For a moment, they manage to dominate the fight, and the protagonist notices that they are beginning to gain the upper hand. But suddenly, the Dean calls in reinforcements, and the protagonist is surprised because he had forgotten that there were others there. But now, all the students were already feeling depressed because of the Dean. Irritated by that, he starts shouting, calling them scoundrels and saying that they are like that only because they were scolded by an idiot, asking whether they really intend to stay on the ground forever so that others can step on them. He points out that the teacher is giving everything she has to protect her students, but some of the students are already too depressed, saying that they are too worthless to survive and that they all deserve to die together. Chen gets ready to use his secret weapon, saying that there is no other choice, so he will need to use that move to awaken their fighting spirit. He holds up the teacher's underwear and says that it will be the prize for the student who eliminates the most enemies. The boys immediately become excited again, which means that the teacher is currently without the lower part. The students say that fighting for their lives was not worth it, but since the reward is extremely valuable, they need to do it for the teacher. The students begin fighting like true warriors, easily eliminating all the zombies that approach. Xingxi asks whether all the students in that class are idiots, but the protagonist keeps encouraging his soldiers, saying that the officer will also give hers as a present. But she tells him not to use her underwear as motivation for the others. But the truth is that her underwear was not for the others, but so that he himself could give it his all. The teacher manages to land a direct blow on the dean, and the protagonist realizes that it is an excellent opportunity and attacks with everything he has. As a result, he manages to eliminate the dean and gains 2,000 experience points, raising his level to 6. He says that it is time to stop fighting, and his ring appears as he stores his sword, saying that they have finally defeated the boss of that instance. The game says that the mission has been completed. They survived 72 hours and the reward is 2,000 experience points. The students' levels begin to rise and they say that they can feel their strength increasing. The idiotic penguin appears, congratulating everyone. He points out that compared to other cases, their survival rate is surprisingly high. However, they should not get too excited, since this is only the beginning of the game. One of the students says that he is going to make Roast Penguin and tries to attack him, saying that it was thanks to him that everyone is trapped in that mess. However, the young man's blow passes right through the penguin. Gigi explains that everyone should continue using their strength to entertain him. In addition, he points out that he is someone from a dimension superior to everyone there, and that if they want to remain attached to life, they need to do what is necessary. Because of that, the next test will begin soon, so they need to take advantage of this temporary period of safety because he is not a demon. The boy remains angry, telling the penguin not to leave and asking how his sister is doing. Chen tries to calm his companion down, asking him not to be so impulsive, since there is no point in opposing that guy. But the young man grabs the protagonist by the shirt, completely furious, and asks why he is so familiar with that game and who exactly he is and what his objective is. Because of that, the other students also start having doubts, saying that the protagonist really does know a lot and maybe has some hidden motive. Chen starts smiling and takes advantage of that opportunity, pointing out that that world is full of things they cannot understand, just like inside the game. The boy is shocked, and the protagonist grabs his arm and says out loud that he has already been through similar situations in the past. And if it were not for him saving everyone, teaching them how to fight, and giving everything he had to protect them, they would have already become zombies. And even after all that, this is how they repay their savior. The boy from before, even while trembling, takes a deep breath and apologizes, saying that he was being too impulsive, but the truth is that he is very worried about his own sister. The protagonist answers harshly, saying that unfortunately, his family and friends may not have been as lucky as he was, and that it is highly possible that they are already dead or have become part of the zombie army. For angering the people, he gains 70 system points, but the others begin saying that he is going too far, while others cry over their families. Chen continues speaking, saying that at that moment, the most important thing is survival. Although that game is dangerous, it is also full of countless possibilities. As long as they survive and keep growing stronger, perhaps they can find a way to save other people. And if they believe in and trust him, the protagonist promises to do everything he can to help them all survive together. Xingxi is completely enchanted by the protagonist's authority and masculinity. She thinks that when he decides to act like a true leader and speak seriously, he becomes a completely different person. But that does not last long. He goes right back to normal and says that the most important thing has arrived. He picks up the underwear, saying that the student who killed the most zombies must have the highest experience points, so he needs to go over there and claim his reward. Ouyang becomes furious and puts him in an arm lock. The protagonist says that he was wrong and begs to be spared, but at least he gained 50 points before being taken down. Xingxi sees that pathetic scene and takes back everything she said about that guy because he really is a complete idiot. With that, the mission was completed and that area temporarily became a level D safe zone. But that was exactly what the protagonist had already expected. After the completion of the first mission, that area would be turned into a safe zone. The highest level player in that safe zone would automatically be appointed as the manager of the safe zone. Because of that, he needed to plan his building strategy rationally. Xingxi asked what a safe zone meant, Chen explained that it was not entirely safe because in the current world, most areas were in danger. Only a few places could become safe zones. Generally, dangerous creatures did not invade safe zones. That also gave the players in the safe zone a little breathing room. Xiaopeng asked if that meant that as long as they lived at the school, they would be safe. Another student said that maybe it was not that simple because the school's resources were limited, and if they ran out, they would be at a dead end. The protagonist said that he was right, and it was not just that because sometimes the safe zone barrier would fail, leading to monster invasions. If they could not defend it successfully, the safe zone would be destroyed and the players living inside it would lose its protection. The protagonist took out his most powerful weapon, a pocket comb, and told everyone to stay calm because as the handsome, wise, brilliant, and glorious manager of that place, he would definitely lead everyone to build a proper safe zone and protect the safety of all those who live there. Everyone got a little annoyed by how much he was showing off, and that earned him another 10 system points. Xingshi pointed out that although the protagonist was a complete idiot, given the current situation, she only had the option of temporarily obeying his orders. Chen said that was exactly what he wanted to hear and that his first order as commander was that she needed to go to his room so they could have an important experience. She got angry at that and threw him to the ground, saying she had been wrong from the start. A few days later, a mother was running desperately with her daughter, but her daughter could no longer keep running. The monsters were getting closer and closer, while he was merely watching. The two of them reached a dead end, and with no other options, the mother simply stood in front of her daughter and hugged her while crying out for help. The protagonist rushed forward and began eliminating the zombies, telling her not to mind the hardships they had encountered and stressing that they no longer needed to be afraid. While killing the other monsters, he told them to face it with a smile, since the best way to eliminate fear was to confront it. The woman stared in shock while the protagonist smiled at her in a rather frightening way. The little girl pointed at the protagonist and asked her mother if he was not an idiot. The mother tried to cover her daughter's mouth and thanked the protagonist for saving them both. Chen explained that it had only been a small favor. Besides, he said it was very dangerous to keep wandering around there, so he would take them to a safe place. Xiling, still frightened, shouted at the protagonist, asking what he was talking about because monsters were everywhere. So where could a safe place possibly exist? Chen tried to calm her down and told her not to worry, explaining that his home was big and comfortable. But little Xiling bit his hand, shouting for him not to touch her. The protagonist began screaming in pain, asking if she was some kind of dog, but that earned him 40 system points. The little girl's mother picked her up and apologized, saying that unfortunately she was very scared. But Xiling explained to her mother that it was not that, but rather that she thought the uncle was very strange. Chen could not believe what he had just heard and asked the young girl who exactly she was calling uncle because he did not look that old. The mother asked if the place the protagonist had mentioned was really safe. Chen said she could follow him and see with her own eyes, since things could not get any worse if she went. A short while later, they arrived at the safe zone, and he began explaining that it was a temporary safe zone he had established with his classmates. In addition, that place would not be attacked by zombies, at least not in the next few days, and the supplies they had were also sufficient. Xingshi noticed that the protagonist had returned and went over to him, asking if he had found more survivors. He said yes and introduced her, saying that she was Officer Xingshi, the one responsible for the safety and defense of the safe zone. The mother introduced herself, saying her name was Zhuang Xiaowan and that her daughter's name was Zhuang Ziling. The policewoman said that the two of them could stay there as long as they needed without worrying about anything. She pointed out that even though the protagonist was a little abnormal, he was still an extremely reliable person. Chen asked what was so abnormal about him, but everyone stayed silent. He decided to change the subject and asked the two of them to follow him, because he would arrange a place for them to rest. A few minutes later, inside a tent, Xiaowan put Xiling down to rest and went over to the protagonist. Chen looked at her and said that both she and her daughter must have gone through difficult days, so she should rest too. But Xiaowan bowed and thanked him once again for helping them, because if it were not for him, both she and her daughter might have become like those monsters. The protagonist felt a little embarrassed and said that actually he had done it for selfish reasons, explaining that although it might sound a little strange for him to say that, he could not let her stay there for free. Xiaowan also became embarrassed and said that she understood the situation, then removed her clothes, leaving him even more shocked. She moved closer and said that she would not stay there for free so he could do whatever he wanted. However, she wanted to ask him not to hurt her daughter. Chen closed his eyes and shouted at her that she had misunderstood what he meant, explaining that living in the safe zone required hard work, so he had not meant that he had ulterior motives. Once things were cleared up, they sat down on the sofa and, dying of embarrassment, she covered her face saying she did not know what to say. But with a smile on her face, she looked at him and said that for an older woman like her, he probably would not have any interest. But Chen told her that she was very mistaken, since she looked like a young woman, and besides, she was very beautiful and did not look like she had children. To make her feel a little more comfortable, he got up and began leaving the place, saying that she and her daughter should rest very well that night. Xiaowan looked at a small mirror and asked herself whether she really was old. But the truth was that she was very happy because the protagonist's shy look reminded her of her late husband. Outside, Chen was twisting around in frustration, asking himself why he had refused that, since that woman was a goddess and had offered herself for free. The next day in the school park, the protagonist was analyzing the situation, and the system said that first he needed to spend 100 points to exchange for the basic bathhouse blueprint and then confirm the construction. As soon as he did that, some wood appeared and began transforming, and within minutes, a building appeared in that place. A system notification announced that the basic bathhouse construction had been completed. The basic effect of that place could slightly restore the player's stamina. Xiaowan and her daughter were impressed, and Xingxi could not believe that the protagonist had managed to build a structure completely out of nowhere. He explained that this was a game world, so anything could happen, and besides, the girls should worry about cleanliness because he was using important resources to build all that, so they should be grateful. But Xingxi stared at him and pointed out that she always felt that he had ulterior motives, asking if he was planning to spy while they bathed. But he mocked her, saying that he was not interested in her stir-fried green bean figure, and just by annoying her, he earned another 50 points. Since he had spent 100, he had gotten a 50% discount. She pointed a gun at him, asking who he was calling stir-fried beans, but to save his own life, he changed the subject, saying that he had decided they would have stir-fried beans for dinner that night. Ziling sniffed her own body and pointed out that now that he had mentioned it, she realized that she had not had a proper bath in days. The protagonist ran over to her and held her shoulder, saying that she could use it as much as she wanted. Xiling shouted at him again, telling him not to touch her. She also pointed out that she could see right through him and told him not to have improper thoughts about her mother. Since she was acting like that, Chen decided to scare her on purpose and started making strange faces, while thinking that she was right and that he was not only interested in the mother, but also in the daughter, because he would not let her escape and one day would turn her into his daughter. Still staring at her, he asked if she had figured it out, but the girl was completely terrified and ran to her mother, screaming that they had to leave because that man definitely had bad intentions. Chen explained that he was only joking, but apparently he had scared her too much. Xiaowan explained to her overprotective daughter that the protagonist had only been joking with her, so they could go take a bath together. A short while later, inside the bathhouse, Ouyang was relaxing in the hot water. Xingxi looked at the teacher and said that she had incredible melons. The teacher got excited and said that the officer was not bad either, then started grabbing her and saying that she needed to see how well she had developed. Ziling watched with a little envy, and her mother tried to calm her, saying that it was all right because she would keep growing, but she pouted and said that she did not care about that. While they were relaxing there, a small hole appeared in the wall. On the other side, the men were shouting that they were champions, and one of them said that he would do it first. However, a fight broke out among them over who would do it first. But suddenly, the protagonist arrived and everyone became frightened. Chen scolded them all, saying that they were doing something indecent and that he did not remember teaching any of them to do that. All the men apologized, saying that they would not do it again. Chen accepted the apologies and said that he would fix the hole, but asked them not to do it again. As soon as the men started leaving, a little disappointed, he began to laugh because now he could peep as much as he wanted. But as soon as he looked, Xingxi was standing in front of the hole, asking if he really dared to breathe because if that was the case, then he should accept his punishment. She stuck her finger through the hole, hitting the protagonist in the eye, and he screamed that he had gone blind. While bathing, the protagonist complained that the officer still hit just as hard as before because what was he supposed to do if he went blind now? While distracted with his thoughts, he dropped the soap, but before picking it up, he noticed that the boys were watching. Irritated by that situation, he decided to teach all of them a lesson. Suddenly, a system screen appeared saying that the first round of endless trials was about to begin. All surviving players would be teleported to a random space to carry out missions. Completing the mission would grant a large number of rewards. If the mission failed or the player was eliminated, that player would be erased permanently. The players began to be teleported and the protagonist tried to grab his clothes, but even he was teleported before he could get dressed. In the middle of a forest, he complained, saying that it was always the same and that the system should let them have a few minutes to prepare. But while walking, he saw something surprising. Xiaowan and Ziling were there too, and without clothes. Xiaowan, embarrassed, tried to cover her body, telling him not to look, and Ziling went into berserker mode, telling him to stay away because he was nothing but a pervert. Chen also covered himself and asked them to wait because he would get clothes for them. He spent 30 points to get some clothes from the system and thanked it for being there at times like that. Otherwise, things would have been very complicated. However, the other people who had been in the bathhouse were not so lucky. Ziling asked what was going on because she and her mother had clearly been in the bathhouse. So how had they suddenly ended up in that ghostly place? The protagonist explained that, as she herself could see, Those were the rules of the game. The system would teleport surviving players to a random space to complete missions. As for the specific reason, even if she asked, he would not know how to answer. Xiaowan became even more worried, saying that she and her daughter were just ordinary people, so how could they survive in such a dangerous world? Chen told her not to be so worried and explained that as long as they gained experience and skill equipment, anyone could become stronger. Besides, he promised to protect them both. Xiaowan blushed and smiled, thanking him again, but the overprotective daughter stepped between them, shouting for her mother not to let him deceive her with sweet words. The protagonist thought that apparently he had completely misunderstood that girl. Xiling kept shouting that that guy was a great villain. While they were analyzing the situation, the protagonist noticed something approaching and quickly dodged an arrow flying toward him. He shouted, telling the person to come out from wherever they were. Xiaowan stepped in front of her daughter and told her to stay there. Some people began to appear. The tribal leader told the protagonist that they had to follow them, otherwise they would be eliminated. Chen asked where the man got the idea that they would follow him just because they were being threatened. He stepped in front of the two of them and told the mountain savages not to try to touch a single strand of their hair. Xiling looked at the protagonist and thought that she really had not imagined that he had such a reliable side. The mountain savages prepared to attack, but the protagonist shouted for them to wait and explained that, after thinking for a moment, he had decided to go with them. Xiling and her mother could not believe it. She shouted, asking if he had not said that he would protect them. Chen asked if she really wanted to see him get hit by arrows like a porcupine, but he merely smiled. With that, all of them were tied up and started being taken away. Xiaowan asked if they were not in danger by acting that way, but once again he told her not to be so afraid and explained that the game would never lead players directly to death. As long as they could find a way, they would be able to eliminate all enemies. But Xiling said that he was just a coward and that those people were clearly not good, so they were in trouble. Chen tried to scare her, saying that she had better be careful because those savages had probably never seen a pretty young girl like her and might take advantage of her a little. She became completely frightened and told her mother to look at his attitude, but the protagonist explained that he was again only trying to scare her. Sometime later, already in the Worm God village, one of the people who had captured the protagonist went to the chief and said that they had managed to bring the people back to the village. The chief said that was very good and told his subordinate to prepare quickly so they could begin the ritual. The chief started laughing, and the protagonist asked him why they were there and what exactly that ritual was. The chief explained that this was the village of the Worm God and that they had been protected by the Great Worm God for generations. And that was exactly why every year they performed a sacrificial ceremony, offering a beautiful woman to the Great Worm God to show gratitude. Xiling became even more horrified, realizing that this was really going to happen. The chief told his subordinates to tie up the sacrifices and send them to the side of the Worm God's lair. The men began approaching the girl, who panicked, saying that she did not want to go through that and called for her mother. But when she looked to the side, she realized that her mother was also being captured. She ran to try to help her, but tripped over a stone. With tears in her eyes, she asked why the sacrifice had to be her mother. The protagonist explained that Xiaowan was a beautiful woman and had a great body, and that if he were the Worm God, he definitely would not choose Xiling, who had not even developed yet. Irritated, she bit the protagonist again and he told her to let go. The little girl asked what she should do because she needed to find a way to save her mother. Chen said that first they needed to follow them and then they would think of how to help. Xiaowan was tied up and hung above a hole. Frightened, she asked what exactly they were trying to do. The chief began making his offering, calling upon the Great Worm God to present the sacrifice so that he could continue granting his protection. But the protagonist stepped forward and shouted for him to wait. Everyone else got angry, asking where that brat had come from and how he dared interrupt the ceremony. Chen asked whether it was not a little cruel to use living people in such a sacrifice, but the chief pointed out that becoming a sacrifice for the Great Worm God was a supreme honor, so there was nothing cruel about it. Chen said that if it was such an honor, then the village chief should enjoy that honor to the fullest. He kicked the chief, who was standing at the edge of the hole, sending him down. The rest of the tribe could not believe that the chief had been kicked into the hole. From outside, they could hear the village chief's screams, begging the Great Worm God not to do that. Chen kept smiling and said that apparently the great god was satisfied with the sacrifice of the village chief. One of the subordinates prepared to attack, saying that the protagonist had just killed the village chief, so he had to pay in kind. He shot an arrow, but the protagonist managed to dodge it and use it to free his hands. He thanked the man for helping him save himself and told them all to attack at the same time, because he was getting a little bored. The mountain savages got even angrier when they saw that he was mocking them. Chen grabbed his weapon and started fighting against the savages. One of them took advantage of the situation and shot an arrow, hitting the rope that was holding Xiaowan. The daughter began screaming desperately for her mother, and the protagonist also got worried. She fell into the middle of the worms, which quickly started climbing onto her body. Xiling did not think twice and ran forward, jumping into the hole. The protagonist tried to stop her, saying that she was just a clumsy little girl, but Zealing had already made up her mind. However, she noticed something strange and asked why she was not falling. Chen had caught her and asked if she really thought this was a joke, pointing out that if she had fallen from that height, she clearly would have been eliminated. The girl started crying, asking why he had saved her, because she could not stand there watching her mother get eliminated. Chen asked if she really thought he had wanted to save her because he had not expected her to be so small yet so heavy. Zealing started shouting, asking who he was calling fat. Chen tried to tell her to stop moving, but it was too late. Her shirt ended up tearing, and he complained that he would not have any more clothes if she kept tearing them. At the bottom of the hole, she got up complaining of pain and asking what kind of place that was. A little lost, she looked ahead, calling for her mother, and even for the protagonist. She heard someone approaching and a voice saying that he was there. A little more relieved, she looked back, asking how Chen had gotten down. However, what she was seeing was a ghost of the protagonist. The ghost said that because of her, he had been eliminated and suffered a horrible punishment. Zealing became desperate and screamed that she had not meant that, asking for forgiveness. The protagonist told her to say that he was a good big brother 3 times. Then he could rest in peace and forgive her. Without thinking twice, she shouted that he was a good big brother 3 times in a row. Chen touched her head, saying that he had finally managed to hear it and removed the mask he had been using to scare her, saying that since she was calling him so intimately, he could call her dear little sister. Zealing became furious, asking how he dared trick her like that, and headbutted his stomach, saying that he was going too far. The protagonist explained that he had not only been trying to lighten the mood because he had done it since he thought she was too nervous and would collapse. Zealing said that this was not the time to talk about those things and asked if he had seen her mother. Chen said that while she had been unconscious, he had searched all around inside there but could not find her. Frightened, she began to cry and asked if that meant her mother had been devoured by the god. However, the protagonist found that a little strange, because he had only found the village chief's remains at the bottom of the cave, but had found nothing of her mother, which meant that she must have been taken by that worm god as a food reserve. Suddenly, a panel with the main mission appeared, saying that he needed to eliminate the worm god and the mission reward was experience points. In addition, he also had a side mission, which was to rescue Xiaowan in order to gain the reward of a mysterious item. He explained that the mission was asking him to save Xiaowan, so everything he had said was correct. And besides, she should be safe for now. Zealing, anxious to see her mother again, asked the protagonist what they were waiting for because they needed to go immediately. Chen knelt in front of her and held her firmly, saying that she would be safe there so she should hide, because he promised he would save her mother. Moved, she thanked him and ended up agreeing. Chen shouted that this way he would be able to be alone with Xiaowan, imagining that as soon as he managed to rescue her, she would fall in love and ask how she could repay him, so he would suggest giving Zealing a younger brother. She slapped him across the face, saying that she had already known he had ulterior motives. But the protagonist decided to speak seriously. He explained that she was just a little girl, so even if she went along, she would only get in the way. Zealing began looking at her hands, saying that if she were an adult, she could save her mother. Chen offered help, saying that if she really wanted to become an adult, he could help. Zealing became suspicious again and asked what he was thinking of doing to her, but the protagonist explained that it was not that kind of thing she was thinking and showed her a pill, saying that all she had to do was eat that golden kalata and she could quickly become an adult. That golden pill cost 100 points, and its effect was to instantly bring the user to an adult state. If an adult took it, it would cause some irregular effects. Zealing held the pill in her hand and asked if she would really become an adult after eating it. He said yes. However, he wanted to point out one thing, asking her to think very carefully about it because if she lost her development period and became a washboard, it would be too late to regret it. Without thinking twice, Zealing took the pill and her body began to change drastically, leaving the protagonist surprised. Even Zealing was surprised to see that she had in fact transformed into an adult. Chen held the package of his golden pills, saying that this was already expected, because there had been no loss or evaporation, and that was how she had grown so much. Zealing became embarrassed and covered her body, asking him not to look. He covered his eyes tightly and said that he was not looking. Still embarrassed, she ran behind some rocks and asked if he could give her some clothes to change into. Chen agreed, saying that if that was the case, then he would give her some professional clothes to wear. She took off her old clothes, asking what kind of professional clothes those would be. The protagonist explained that after she equipped professional attire for a certain profession, she would be able to obtain that profession's skill tree, and if she really wanted to help in battle, all she had to do was choose a profession. Zealing got excited and asked if she could really choose any profession. Chen said yes, anyone she could imagine. Zealing said that she wanted to become a magical girl, but the protagonist began to laugh. Zealing got angry, saying that he was just laughing. The protagonist kept laughing, saying that she was only a little girl. Zealing asked if it was wrong for a little girl to like magic, but the protagonist said that it was no problem. If that was what she wanted, then it was fine. He handed her a staff, saying that if she shouted magical girl transformation, she would be able to That was the Impossible Goddess Magic Wand, level D, which cost 300 points. Its effect was that after equipping it, all one had to do was say that phrase to transform into the impossible form. As he was explaining it to her, he ended up saying the phrase. The scepter began to glow, and he asked what was happening. He realized that he had transformed, which left him surprised to see that even men could transform by saying the spell. But he took that situation lightly, saying that it did not look too bad. Xiling almost went blind from seeing that horrible thing. She said that it was far too horrible to keep looking at and told him to hand over the wand already. But the protagonist kept running, saying that if she managed to catch him, then she could keep the wand. Xiling threw a stone at his head and grabbed the staff, then quickly said the spell to transform. Chen was enchanted, saying that apparently time stopped when a girl transformed, and the details were really impressive. Xiling asked what he thought. He kept teasing, saying that an 18-year-old magical girl was a little too old, but Xiling explained that actually she was only 6 years old, though she did not feel like she had gained any magic. Chen explained that she needed to explore those things slowly, but she could try saying a spell and maybe it would work. Xiling thought that made sense and tried using an invisibility spell. Chen was surprised and asked where she had gone. She got surprised and asked if he was serious, and whether he really could not see her. The protagonist kept telling her to stop playing around because they needed to go soon, so she should appear already. Xiling took advantage of the situation to go relieve herself because she had been holding it in for a long time and could finally let go. While enjoying the moment, Chen crouched beside her and stared at her face. She was startled, and he said that this was not something a young lady should do. Xiling quickly pulled her clothes up, saying that he should not do that, and asked why he had said that he could not see her. Chen explained that he had only been joking and could not believe that she had really fallen for that trick. Xiling kept feeling embarrassed, saying that now she would never be able to get married. Chen told her to be quiet because he was hearing something. Suddenly, several insects began approaching them. Xiling got scared and asked why so many had suddenly appeared. The protagonist explained that those were blood-sucking worms, and they were very sensitive to the smell of a prey's bodily fluids, so as long as they sensed the smell, they would gather. And all of that was because someone had relieved herself just anywhere, which attracted that enormous number of bugs. Xiling shouted that she could not be blamed for that and threw herself into the protagonist's arms, saying that they were getting too close, and in her panic asked whether she was going to be devoured by those insects. The protagonist took out a level D diuretic, which contained a concentrated liquid and, after consumption, could quickly produce a strong urge to urinate. Besides, only 1 milliliter per dose was required. Holding the bottle, he told her not to worry because he had found a way to deal with that. Chen drank the entire bottle and shouted that the urge was already coming. He removed his pants and she asked why he was doing that. Chen explained that he was doing it to break the seal. He concentrated and used water release, water dragon jutsu. Thanks to the huge amount of urine, the worm stopped approaching and went for the new target. He fell to the ground, saying that there was not a single drop of water left in his body. Xiling got worried and asked if he was all right. With a pale and dried up face, he said that he was fine. The only problem was that his kidney hurt a little. Xiling said that they needed to get out of there before those insects came back. However, the insects began to die, and the system informed him several times that he had gained 10 experience points. He explained that it was all right because after taking that medicine, toxins were produced in the urine, causing all the insects to be eliminated. Xiling was happy, however, she asked how they would be able to find her mother's whereabouts. Chen took out an item, saying that at times like these, he needed to use his equipment, and explained that if they could follow the mother's scent, they would be able to find her. That was a level D K9 nasal spray, which cost 50 points. After use, a person could gain an extremely powerful sense of smell for a certain period of time. Xiling asked why he had so many strange things and whether he was a blue-faced cat. Chen explained that a man with a secret was charming. However, he told her to stop talking nonsense and asked if she had any personal belonging of her mother with her. Xiling became embarrassed and said that she did have one belonging, then carefully handed it to him. The protagonist looked at the item and asked whether she really carried her mother's socks with her, which showed that she was perverted. Xiling said that he was the last person who could call someone a pervert. She explained that some time ago she had been playing with that sock and ended up keeping it. Chen handed her the spray and asked for the sock so that he could smell it and find the mother. Xiling agreed, but threw the spray at the protagonist's head, telling him not to put the sock on his head, but Chen was savoring it, saying that it smelled like ripe fruit. Xiling opened the magic orb and noticed that it came with instructions. Meanwhile, the protagonist was sniffing like a dog. He told Xiling to immediately look up some useful magical spells because maybe that would be better for the future. Xiling explained that she was very hungry and asked if he could summon some kind of food. Chen explained that unfortunately he did not have any food there with him. Besides, if she wanted to survive in that game, survival skills were very important. Xiling pointed behind him, asking what those things were. Some bats were flying toward them, but the protagonist started attacking them and explained that those bats had red eyes, and the orb she had created to light the path had probably drawn their attention. While continuing to fight, he told her to focus, that he would take care of everything. He kept eliminating all the bats, but began to grow exhausted because there were many red-eyed bats, and he needed to think of a more effective way. Xiling shouted for him to lower his head and used magical flame, destroying everything in front of her. The protagonist said that he had already forgotten about the bats because now he was more afraid of the fire than of them, and Chen praised her, saying that he was truly surprised. She smiled, a little embarrassed, thanking him for the compliment, but thought that it was better not to mention that by accident he had lost half his hair. Suddenly she smelled the bats and said that they were scary, but after being burned, the smell was very good, which made her ask whether they were edible. But the protagonist told her that she could not do that because bats carried many diseases, and only idiots with something wrong in their heads would consume something like that. Xiling asked what they should do then, because she was already a little hungry, but because she had used fire magic, her hunger had increased drastically. Chen said that was true, and that he had already found the safest and most nutritious food they could have. As soon as she saw what it was, she asked whether he was serious. The protagonist held one of the insects in his hand, saying that it tasted like crispy chicken, so all they had to do was remove the head and then eat it. Xiling refused, saying that even if she starved to death, she would not eat those disgusting things. The protagonist picked up a few and said that if that was the case, then he would savor those delicacies all by himself. Xiling ended up being overcome by hunger and looked at the skewers, and suddenly her stomach growled. Chen showed a skewer to her, saying that if she called him Big Brother Chen, then he would not mind letting her eat a little. Since she was starving, she ended up agreeing to the game, and Chen said that she was a good girl and handed her the food. As soon as she tasted a bite, she felt a wonderful flavor and asked what kind of insect that was. The protagonist explained that those were the larvae of the bone-penetrating flying worms. Those worms collected the prey's flesh and blood to feed their larvae, and that was why they were plump and soft. Xiling looked a little more at the ground and said that if there were so many larvae there, then that meant that suddenly the flying insects began approaching, and the protagonist said that apparently they seemed very angry. Xiling pointed out that this was obvious since their larvae had been eaten. The protagonist grabbed her and started running, saying that they needed to get out of there immediately since those guys' shells were very hard, so the weapon he had and the magic she could use were not capable of damaging their armor. Xiling said that he should have explained that a little earlier before they started eating, but while they ran like crazy, something that no one expected happened. Xiling hit her foot on a stone and fell to the ground. Even knowing that it would be her end, she shouted for the protagonist to keep running and not worry about her, because his goal was to save Xiaowan. The protagonist kept running, saying for her not to worry, because he had not planned on saving her anyway. She thought that this time he had gone too far, so after she became a ghost, she would not leave him in peace. One of the flying worms approached her, and with tears in her eyes, she simply said goodbye. However, the worms simply ignored her. The protagonist started shouting, asking them to look at him, showing his own body and telling them not to pretend they did not care since it was obvious that they wanted a taste. Xiling kept staring and asked what that guy was doing. But after the protagonist had accumulated so many points, he had been able to buy some things, like golden insecticide, which cost 100 points. Its effect was a powerful liquid insecticide that had to be applied to the bait, though it could not be used as lubricant. The flying insects went toward him, and the protagonist said that now it was time to die. In a matter of seconds, he was completely devoured by the insects, which also ended up dying because of the poison. Only his skeleton remained and fell to the ground. Xiling ran to him and began screaming while crying, saying that he had sacrificed himself to save her and her mother, and that her attitude toward him had always been very bad. But the protagonist came back to life again, and the resurrection system was activated, consuming 300 points. Chen touched her head, saying that everything was all right and that he really would not mind if she were a little gentler with him in the future. Confused, she looked at him and asked if he was not dead. Chen explained that good people die young, but scourges live for thousands of years, so a bad guy like him would not die that easily. Xiling was so happy and relieved that he was alive that she shouted that it was great and hugged him. Chen kept joking about the situation, saying that she could get emotional all she wanted, but she did not need to take advantage of the situation to grope him. Xiling took a deep breath and tried to calm down, asking why he had not been eliminated. The protagonist went on explaining that when normal people flirted with death, they ended up dying for good, but when he flirted with death, he simply could not be eliminated. Xiling tried to understand, but in the end, understood nothing. The protagonist changed the subject and pointed toward the sky, shouting for the stupid system to give him his rewards already, because they still had not arrived. Immediately, the system congratulated the host for facing death once again, giving him 50 points. In addition, the system reward was being delivered at that very moment. He thought that he really was the protagonist of this story because even the system rewards were a little unconventional. Suddenly, a sword started flying toward him, making him realize that something was wrong. Barely, he dodged the sword and complained to the system again, saying that he had only provoked it a little and it was already being cruel. That was the sword called 3 Lives Assassin, Level A. It could absorb the spirit of the dead. Those killed by that blade would cease to exist in their past, present, and future lives. As soon as he eliminated an enemy, there was a certain chance of absorbing that enemy's abilities. The protagonist held the sword and began to laugh, saying that this time, dying had truly been worth it. While he observed his new weapon, something enormous began breaking through the roof of the cave. That was the bone-penetrating Flying William King, Level C. The king of the colony would launch deadly attacks against any enemy that harmed his colony, so the protagonist had to be extremely careful with its scythe-shaped claws. The chief began approaching, and the protagonist thought that now was a great time to test his new sword. But as soon as he tried to draw it, he realized that it was not coming out. Xiling shouted at him, saying that this was not the time for him to be playing around. She tells him to hurry up and pull out that sword because apparently it is almost coming loose. Chen points out that there is no other choice. It is stuck too tightly, and if he keeps pulling too hard, he might end up damaging the sword and it will be useless later. But he feels that it is finally coming out, and as soon as he draws his sword, he says he is ready and asks her to watch every single movement. He jumps onto the boss's back, telling the insect to die already. But as soon as he attacks the insect, the boss begins to fly around desperately, smashing into every corner of the cave. The protagonist starts getting excited by the situation, saying that the boss is pretty durable and that because of that, they can play a little longer. He asks if Xiling wants to get up there and have some fun too, because this is way more exciting than a roller coaster. However, she tells him to hurry up and finish that fight and stop playing with death. Chen keeps enjoying the moment, telling her not to worry because that boss is basically already dead. But he ends up hitting his head against a cave rock and says he was mistaken. The boss takes advantage of that opportunity to counterattack. Chen sees the attack coming and shouts that he is in big trouble since he cannot dodge while he is in the air. Xiling attacks with flames and manages to save Chen. She asks if he is alright, but the protagonist simply thanks her for the help and says that next time he will reward her with a lollipop. He grabs a skewer with the worms and starts eating them while asking the boss if those are the colony's children. As soon as he chews one of the insects, the boss is consumed by rage and charges at him again. But the protagonist manages to block the attack and quickly grabs his other knife. He thinks that thanks to the knife the butcher gave him, he managed to hit the boss's weak point. However, the boss also counterattacks, hitting the protagonist in the shoulder. Because of the pain he suffered, the experience of the heavenly scripture and earth affinity increases. Thanks to that, his strength also rises, and he manages to cut off the boss's claw. And with quick movements, he manages to dodge the other attacks and moves to the boss's head, cutting it into 2 parts. The system congratulates him, saying that he gained 3,000 experience points and rose to level 7. Besides that, something else begins to happen. His new sword absorbs all of that energy. The system says that he now possesses the flying blade, the soul absorption was successful, and thanks to the flying blade, he can release blade aura for long-range attacks. He tests his new ability on the wall and is surprised, saying that this was already expected from an A-grade weapon. It really has a very powerful ability. Xiling asks if he can stop doing such dangerous things, because this time, she thought he was going to die again. The protagonist puts away his weapon and runs to her, saying that he would really like to hug her to thank her. However, she notices that there is something on top of him and asks what that disgusting thing is, telling him to wash himself. But the protagonist explains that everything is fine because that insect's bodily fluid is not harmful to humans. However, for his clothes, it is fatal. Xiling slaps him so he will stop being like that. She tells him to go put on clothes immediately because she does not want to keep seeing that. Meanwhile, in another place surrounded by spiderwebs, Xiaowan wakes up and asks if she is not dead and where she really is. But when she looks to the side, she notices other corpses, which makes her think that that could be some creature's ovary, and maybe she was trapped there to serve as food for those larvae that are about to mature. However, she notices a frightening presence and, when she looks to the side, sees a gigantic spider in front of her. The smaller spiders begin coming out of the eggs and she screams desperately, telling them not to come near her, but it is useless. The spiders, both the big one and the small ones, keep approaching. But suddenly, the protagonist throws a can at the bigger spider's head, saying that feeding it with such a beautiful woman is a huge waste. Chen apologizes to Xiaowan for arriving a little late, but says he is there to save her. The large spider rushes toward the protagonist and Xiaowan gets frightened, telling him to be careful, but Chen manages to dodge all the attacks with some ease, asking where exactly it is aiming since it cannot hit anything. The spider keeps attacking over and over again, but none of it works. Because he continues dodging easily, he goes over to Xiaowan and tells her to stay calm because he is going to get her out of there. But the spider tries to attack him again. Chen simply tells it to stop, and the spider remains motionless for a moment. It tries to attack again, but it has run out of web to shoot. Chen points out that he had told it not to keep attacking so many times, and now its balance has gone negative. He tries to remove the spider web to save Xiaowan, but realizes he cannot manage to remove it. Seeing that he had no other choice, he draws his sword again and tells her not to move. And with quick movements and precise cuts, he manages to destroy all the webs around her, saving her. He tells her to stay calm, but as soon as he looks forward, he sees that he is at the perfect height. Xiaowan gets a little embarrassed and tells him not to keep looking at her like that. On the other hand, the spider was getting more and more furious. It lets out a terrifying scream and tries to attack them again. The protagonist says that it saw all of its offspring being killed, so there must be some kind of mutation happening. He shouts for Xiling to attack. She concentrates, creating several fire spheres at the same time and throws them, causing a huge explosion. But something begins to go wrong and she cries out for help. Chen runs to her and tries to help, but she ends up falling on top of him. Xiling asks if Chen is okay. As soon as things calm down a little, Xiaowan goes over to them and asks if that woman is really Xiling. She is surprised to see that her mother managed to recognize her. Xiaowan hugs her daughter, saying that she would recognize her no matter what, because the two of them share the same blood. Chen looks at them and says that now he knows why Xiling has 3 moles on her chest. She looks at him in surprise, seeing that he really knows about the moles, and asks how he found out about that. Chen explains that his English name is Leuvenhoek, which means that her body holds no secrets from him. She changes the subject and points out that that big spider ran away. Chen, with slightly sleepy eyes, tells her not to worry and explains that that spider is badly wounded, so it probably will not be able to move for a while. Suddenly, he falls on top of her, startling her. Xiaowan tells her daughter that apparently the protagonist ended up falling asleep. Xiling lays him down on her lap and points out that although the protagonist kept fooling around the whole time, he did not rest for even a single minute, so it is normal that he is exhausted and sleeping. Xiaowan lies down next to the protagonist, saying that she already knew that the two of them wanted to go there to save her, which shows that that man is definitely trustworthy. Xiling gets a little irritated, saying that he is not trustworthy at all because he kept intimidating her the whole time. Xiaowan keeps looking at her daughter and points out that what makes her most curious is all of this change. She holds her daughter's body, asking how she grew so much, but at least she took after her mother. Xiling asks her mother to stop with that joke because it is a little strange. Meanwhile, outside the hole, the spider was coming out, shouting angrily at the humans because it would definitely take revenge. The tribe of wild men looks at it and says that the insect god has appeared. However, they are instantly eliminated, drained down to the last drop of their power. It points out that when its power is fully restored, it will tear that cursed human to pieces. Meanwhile, the protagonist was dreaming that he was drowning inside a river because he could not breathe. At another moment, as soon as he wakes up, he rises in fright because he had almost been unable to breathe. Xiaowan apologizes for scaring him, and Xiling was also a little sleepy. Chen says that it is entirely his fault because he ended up falling asleep by accident, but in any case, they need to get out of that place first. Xiaowan points out that the cave entrance is very high and they will not be able to get out. The protagonist holds an object in his hands and says that that is the reward he received after saving her, and with that, they can simply leave that place. He decides to use the item and suddenly starts floating. The system says that they need to choose a nearby coordinate to be teleported to, and the cooldown is 24 hours. He asks the two of them to hold tightly onto his shoulders, and suddenly the teleportation begins. A few seconds later, on the other side, he realizes that the teleportation was successful, but he is surprised to see that, once again, all of them appeared without clothes. The two women notice this and get dressed quickly. However, what catches the protagonist's attention the most is that something is a little strange, because there should have been villagers guarding the entrance to the insect god's cave. However, there is not a single person nearby. Xiaowan points behind him and tells him to take a look. As soon as he looks, he is surprised. The village had been completely destroyed and all the villagers were dried up, with no energy left at all. They approach to take a look and ask what happened there and why all of them are lifeless. Chen grabs one of the villagers' hands and realizes that all the flesh and blood were sucked out. Suddenly, an attack comes toward them, but the protagonist manages to summon his weapon and defend himself. The insect goddess had arrived before him and pushes him away, saying that she really did not expect the protagonist to come to her looking for death, but that only saved her the trouble of looking for him. Chen stares at her, a little confused, and asks who she is. The goddess, completely enraged, shouts that her family was ruined by the protagonist and asks how he does not remember the insect goddess, the Spider Queen. Xiling says that that is impossible because she herself burned the spider to death, so how did it end up becoming that? The Spider Queen explains that her body suffered a mutation, and that is why it took human form. Besides that, after managing to absorb the flesh and blood of those idiots, she became at least 10 times stronger. While she was saying that, the protagonist simply rushes forward and lands a precise strike. managing to hit one of the spider's arms. He says that this is not an ambush, but an idiot villain dying because it talked too much. He keeps attacking and the Spider Queen tries to dodge, but the attacks were getting closer and closer. With a tense expression, she says that he is very naive because the flesh and blood of those humans gave her an incredibly powerful self-healing ability. She manages to rebuild the arm he had cut off and points out that no matter how many times he cuts her, he will never truly be able to hurt her. She uses the 1,000 Spider Silk Web Matrix skill while shouting that she needs revenge for her children and her home. The protagonist tells the two women to get out of the way because he will take care of the situation. Xiao Wan grabs her daughter and pulls her away, but the protagonist is trapped inside a giant cocoon together with the Insect Queen. Inside the cocoon, the protagonist keeps cutting all the threads coming toward him, but realizes that his opponent has become much stronger. He asks how many people's flesh and blood she absorbed. The insect goddess says that cows eat grass, humans eat cows, demons eat humans, and that is simply the natural order of things. She asks whether he can remember how many steamed buns he has eaten in his life, but when he remembers the steamed buns, he starts thinking about something else and says that it depends on what kind of steamed buns she is talking about. Realizing that, she tries to seduce him, asking if he wants her steamed buns too. But the protagonist refuses, saying that he has no interest in those aged buns and calls her a monster. The Spider Queen attacks again, saying that apparently he definitely wants to die, but he keeps provoking her, saying that she cannot touch him and rushes forward quickly, claiming that she can heal 100 times and he will knock her down 100 more times, since he has all day to play with her. However, a strange smoke appears and he starts writhing, asking why he suddenly feels weaker and limp. She explains that the reason he was trapped inside that silk sphere is because that place is full of bone-melting smoke, a silk that emanates from the human body, and even a great immortal would become dizzy and confused inside it. Taking advantage of that situation, she manages to capture him, but the protagonist keeps acting the same way, saying that she really managed to capture him, so now she can do whatever she wants, torture him or kill him. The spider approaches and with a smile on her face touches the protagonist's face, saying that revenge for her children must be carried out. However, all of that was part of his plan, because he had already courted death a few times, which gave him enough points to revive a few times. She attacks and the protagonist prepares for the end, but realizes that only his clothes were destroyed. Confused, he asks whether she was not supposed to kill him. So why did she simply tear his clothes apart? The Spider Queen keeps looking at him, saying that because of him, all of her children were eliminated. Besides that, the bone-melting smoke will keep him in perpetual arousal, so dying with a kind of endless pleasure is actually something good for him. However, what she really wants is for him to give all her children back. But the protagonist says that he would rather die than be dishonored and tells her to stay away. The noises inside that place begin, and Xiling becomes desperate, saying that they cannot let the protagonist go through that, so they need to get him out of there. Xiao Wan tries to stop her daughter, asking her not to be rash, but she remains desperate and asks what they should do. Then she gets an idea, because spiders are probably afraid of fire. She uses her flame power to attack that silk sphere, but it is useless since it does not leave a single scratch. She remains desperate, asking what they should do, because he is fighting alone and they cannot do anything. Chen begins begging for Her Majesty to show mercy, but other noises begin to appear. Xiling asks her mother what kind of noise that is coming from inside. Xiao Wan tries to dodge the subject, saying that some matters are still a little too early for her to understand. A short while later, a slash is made in the silk sphere, and the Spider Queen comes out of it completely euphoric, saying that that battle was thrilling. Xiling asks what happened to the protagonist. The queen shows him completely dried out and throws him to the ground, saying that she devoured him completely and only the remains were left. The two women become desperate, unable to believe that this was really happening. Xiling holds his body and begins to cry. However, the protagonist's body simply scatters into the wind. The Spider Queen tells them not to worry and places a hand on her stomach, saying that his life will be preserved by her. On the other hand, the two of them only need to become her food. The queen attacks, and Xiao Wan runs to try to save her daughter, but gets caught. Xiling immediately steps in front of her mother, saying that if the queen wants to eat someone, then let it be her and let her mother go away. The queen approaches laughing, saying that the affection between mother and daughter really runs deep, but they should not worry because soon they will be together inside her stomach. However, a sound begins to come from the dust of the protagonist's body and he transforms again. This time, the energy in his body was tremendously greater, making everyone ask what is happening to him. The protagonist continues releasing even more of his strength, and the system informs him that the reward for rebirth has been obtained. Now he possesses the indestructible pure yang body. Concentrating, he brings both hands together, leaving the girls surprised. After using the new ability, his defense and resistance to all negative effects increase greatly, but his attack power and agility are reduced. It is a martial art that combines the Golden Bell shield and the Iron Shirt, and when trained to a high level, it allows someone to become immune to blades and spears and retract his yang. Chen calls out to the queen saying that her opponent has returned and wants a new fight. She charges at him again while he stands completely still and takes the attack. However, her blow does not leave a single scratch, not even on his clothes. He asks if that is really everything she has, and besides that, compared to the way he was punished a short while ago, she will suffer much more. The Spider Queen refuses to give up and tries to attack him again, managing to bind his body and points out that turning him into dust is an immense pleasure. Chen keeps laughing, saying that she had better not regret her choices. The queen creates the silk sphere again, while Xiaowan tries to understand how he was revived, and her daughter explains that he really did revive because something similar had happened before. The two of them begin fighting inside, and the queen comments that he feels like metal, so she will melt him. A few minutes pass and she becomes impressed, saying that in order to last that long, he is definitely stronger than before. 1 hour later, the silk sphere begins moving violently from side to side, and the queen starts screaming, asking how that can happen since it is impossible and begging him to spare her, pleading with him not to come any closer. Exhausted and unable to endure anymore, she tries to leave the silk sphere, saying that she does not want this anymore. However, the protagonist grabs one of her legs, saying that it is not over yet, and pulls her back inside. A short while later, a beam of light begins to come out from inside the silk sphere, quickly intensifying. The Spider Queen loses all of her energy completely and returns to being a small spider. Chen comes out of there and says that compared to him, Xu Xian playing with snakes is just child's play. The system announces that the dungeon mission has been completed and the player will be transferred back to the main world. Xiaowan, who had also been bound by silk, starts freeing herself, since the silk lost all of its power. As soon as the protagonist approaches them, the two of them ask if he is okay and where that big spider went. Chen explains that he is perfectly fine, only a little weak in the legs, but the big spider was dealt with by him. He grabs both of them with a smile on his face, saying that now he is finally ready to go back home. But at the last second, the Spider Queen fires something that strikes Xiaowan on the back of the neck. However, it was so subtle that she only notices a small scratch and soon ignores it, thinking it is nothing. Sometime later in the schoolyard, all the students begin to be brought back. The system congratulates all the players for successfully surviving the dungeon, and each player will receive 3,000 experience points, and the next dungeon will begin in 7 days. Everyone starts leveling up, and Xingxi asks why that is so strange since everyone returned at the same time. The protagonist says that no matter how much time passes in the dungeon, it is only an instant in the main world, so that is exactly why everyone returns at the same time. As soon as the men look at Ziling, they fall in love, wondering whether that cute girl is from their school, and even though she looks a little too old to be a magical girl, she is still incredibly cute. She gets scared and hides behind her mother, who tries to calm her down, telling her not to worry because nobody there wants to hurt her. The protagonist walks to her side, saying that it may be a little complicated to explain in detail, but he will get straight to the point, stating that that is Ziling. The boys are shocked and stunned, asking how that little girl turned into such a beautiful woman and questioning what the protagonist did to her. Suddenly, Xingxi decides to test a few things and tells the protagonist not to keep bothering her. Besides that, she says that it went from a basin all the way to Mount Everest and asks whether she ate some gold claws. Chen says that to celebrate everyone's survival, he will let that one slide this time, because their goal is to celebrate that night. As expected, they get some beer and make a toast. Chen and Xingxi were competing with dice, and as soon as she slams down her cup, she says that she has 5 sixes and cannot believe that he does not have a single 6. Chen snatches away her cup, saying that she was not expecting that, because now he can see her result directly, causing her to lose. Xingxi gets angry, shouting that that is outright cheating, but the protagonist says that there is no rule against playing that way and asks if she is really trying to escape her debt. However, she lies down on the floor and lifts her shirt a little, saying that she will not run from her responsibilities and asks him to hurry up and continue. While he is doing that, she gets embarrassed, saying that she feels a little ticklish, but the protagonist tells her not to move or he will not be able to concentrate. A few minutes later, he throws the brush into the air, saying that, as expected of him, he made a perfect work of art. As soon as she looks, she gets even more embarrassed when she sees that he drew something shameful on her stomach. Even Ziling was enjoying herself at the party, saying that, even without being cold, was really amazing. The men, who were still smitten, were completely lost, because she is a very beautiful woman. However, she should still be 6 years old. Young, with her teacher instincts, steps in and tells all of them not to entertain any kind of thoughts about that little girl. All the men lower their heads and apologize because they were wrong. Xiao Wan approaches and thanks the teacher for helping take care of her daughter and invites her to have a drink. But Young says she's not much of a drinker, yet Xiao Wan tells her not to worry because it is easy to learn. The teacher gets a little embarrassed but ends up agreeing. 3 hours later, Chen takes Xingxi to her room and, even completely drunk, she shouts that she still could drink a little more. However, the protagonist disagrees, saying that she got sick after drinking only one bottle. The policewoman throws herself onto the bed, looking at him while saying that she is still not drunk. Chen takes advantage of the situation and says that he is going to take a picture of her to show her what she looked like the next day, but Xingxi grabs him by the arm and throws him onto the sheets. She asks if he wants to play a game with her called Investigator and Criminal. She gets ready to search him, but the protagonist starts wondering how he can take advantage of a girl when she is in that state. However, if he refuses, that would be even more disrespectful toward her. Suddenly, she pins down his hands and he finds that game interesting. With that, they begin the game, and the system announces that the experience of the heavenly scripture increased even more. The next day, early in the morning, the protagonist gathers everyone, and they begin asking why they are gathering so early. But as soon as the students notice the protagonist's face, they start laughing, saying that the battle from the previous night was very intense. He was covered in marks because of what had happened, but he asks everyone to stop that and points out that the next dungeon will open soon. He explains that during this period, everyone must leave the safe zone and go through live combat training. Xingxi was completely embarrassed, covering her face and asking nobody to ask anything, because she knows nothing at all, but Ouyang asks what exactly the two of them did the previous night. The girls ask whether leaving the safe zone will not be too dangerous, and whether they also need to go just because they are women. The protagonist points out that enemies will not go easier on them just because they are women, and if they cannot even deal with the zombies outside, they probably will not survive the next dungeon. After explaining the situation, he asks everyone to gather supplies and then form groups of 4 people so they can begin the training. Xiaowan goes up to him saying that she's not familiar with fighting and things like that at all and asks whether this could hinder the rest of the team. Chen points out that in general, dungeons are always done in teams. And besides the combat personnel, support personnel are also very important, which is why he prepared suitable professional clothes for her. He asked her not to be so formal because her daughter helped a lot in the last dungeon, so she should simply accept the gift. Once again, the boys could not understand how one person could contain so much beauty, and that was already to be expected from a mother-daughter duo. Xiaowan had received a nurse outfit, but she said she always feels that something is a little strange. That is a level C nurse uniform costing 300 points, and its effect is that after equipping it, it grants auxiliary abilities such as medical arts, basic pharmacology, and artificial respiration. But in truth, the protagonist was thinking that he had finally managed to complete his cast: teachers, policewomen, nurses, and magical girls. The 3 women walk over to him asking whether he is starting to fantasize about something strange. Sometime later, outside the safe zone, Xingxi manages to fire a precise shot into one of the zombies, gaining 100 experience points. However, she ends up lowering her guard and another monster approaches from behind her. She tries to escape, but her clothes end up getting damaged. The teacher appears from behind and finishes off that other zombie. Xiaowan takes the opportunity and runs over to heal her companion. Meanwhile, from a distance, the protagonist watched everything, saying that although they are still a little green, their coordination is not bad, and even without him there, they are already capable of facing danger on their own. Suddenly, he hears a noise and, when he looks again, realizes that an elite monster has just appeared. Xingxi and Ouyang were walking, and the elite monster spots them. The teacher tells the policewoman to act first. She takes aim and thinks that from that distance, she definitely will not miss the shot. But as soon as she fires, the monster simply manages to use its abilities to dodge the bullets. However, the teacher rushes forward quickly and lands an extremely powerful blow, throwing the monster backward. Xingxi is happy because that was already expected from the teacher. She is becoming more and more skilled and does not even need to transform into a half-zombie. Xiaowan also praises the teacher, saying that she gives off a very strong sense of safety. The teacher gets a little embarrassed and with a smile on her face says that honestly she does not like turning into a half-zombie, so she avoids it as much as possible. But in the middle of all that dust, a sound is heard, and suddenly the monster reappears. The monster tries to attack Xiaowan, and the 2 women are frightened because they were not going to be able to stop it. However, the monster is cut in half. The protagonist's sword had struck that monster's head. He goes over to them and extends a hand to the nurse, asking whether she is okay. Xiaowan takes his hand and says that he arrived in time and that she is fine. Xingxi breathes in relief because they were very lucky that the protagonist arrived in time, otherwise things would have become problematic. Chen touches her forehead and explains that in a battle it is very important to protect the weaker teammates. Xiaowan is a healer, so they need to protect her as much as possible. Xiaowan gets a little upset, saying that because she is a healer, she has no strength at all, but the protagonist explains that healer means support personnel, so her main abilities are to heal and serve as support for the rest of the team. Xingxi notices that he used a stamp to mark her forehead and tries to remove it, while explaining that he did not do that on purpose. However, she realizes that she cannot remove the mark he put there. The protagonist shows other stamps, saying that the mark he left on her is not the only one. She realizes that there are other marks on her body and asks when exactly he put those there. The system finally registers that the elite monster was eliminated and gives the protagonist the level D flaming claw blade, which increases the chance of dealing fire damage in attacks. The protagonist points out that the item the elite monster left behind is perfect for the teacher. As soon as she puts on the iron claw, she gets a little upset, since she feels that she's getting farther and farther away from being a normal teacher. Suddenly, someone else comments that apparently they have some good equipment, and they begin emerging from the mist, saying that giving such good items to novice people is a total waste. Chen still remembers those people. They are members of the Light of the Apocalypse. In his past memories, he recalls that they were an arrogant group that acted under the pretense of being good people. Xingxi asks who they are and why they should hand over the loot from the battle they had just won. The group introduces themselves, saying that they are members of the Light of the Apocalypse safe zone, and as the name suggests, they are the light that guides everyone out of that apocalypse. Since those rescued by them should naturally offer unconditional support, everyone ought to do so. But the protagonist asks why they do not call themselves the idiots of the apocalypse instead, because that would fit better, since demanding things like that the moment they open their mouths is pure idiocy. The Beast Woman says that she had originally planned to spare everyone's life, but since he is ungrateful, that will no longer be possible. However, before the fight begins, another message appears saying that the next dungeon is about to start and that the participants will be divided in 2 teams of 4 people. The team that completely eliminates the other wins, and the dungeon area will be a 5-kilometer radius from the current location. Leaving the area will result in immediate death, and everyone will be distributed randomly within the zone. The Catwoman points at the protagonist, saying that apparently he will not get out of this alive, while their leader says that they will settle this quickly. Xiaowan notices that her body is changing, and asks if the dungeon has already started. The protagonist remains relaxed, saying that it seems the time has come to test the results of the training. They are transported, and Xiaowan notices that the place looks like a library, asking whether she was the only one sent there. However, a man with praying mantis claws appears behind her, saying that the system gave him a very weak opponent. He approaches laughing, saying that it has been a long time since he found such sweet prey. Somewhere else, the teacher asks whether they are going to fight, and the Beast Woman gets irritated when she sees that her opponent is another woman. She starts transforming, saying that she wanted to face the protagonist, but she will have to make do with her. She charges forward, saying that she will destroy her and then find the protagonist, but the teacher manages to defend, releasing a large amount of energy. The Catwoman is impressed when she realizes that the teacher really does have skill and comments that this makes the fight more interesting. Ouyang grabs her paw and states that she will regret choosing the wrong enemy. Meanwhile, Xingxi was falling and gets startled, but when she hits the ground, she realizes that she felt no pain. The protagonist, who was underneath her, shouts that she did not feel pain, but he certainly did. She asks why he was there, and Chen says that maybe she grabbed onto him during the teleportation because she missed him so much. Otherwise, she would already be dead. He also comments that she needs to lose a little weight, which makes her furious. And she starts pulling his leg, saying that her weight is perfectly normal. A blonde woman with horns laughs, saying that the two of them seem to have a good relationship. Xingxi retorts irritably, saying that she would never have anything with someone as idiotic as him. The horned woman asks if she is serious. Xingxi turns to speak to Chen, but realizes that he has already disappeared. He appears next to the blonde woman, saying that he has no relationship at all, because compared to immature girls, he prefers a woman like her. Xingxi calls him an idiot and says that he needs to learn to choose the right moment to flirt. Chen draws his sword and declares that she is the enemy, but in the middle of the attack, his blade stops in the air and he realizes that his body is not responding. Xingxi gets ready to shoot, saying that if he cannot do it, then she herself will handle it. However, he puts away the sword and steps in front of her, telling her not to shoot. Xingxi gets even more irritated, saying that he not only hesitated, but is also trying to protect her. Chen tries to explain that it is not his fault because his body is out of control. The horned woman then reveals that in the last dungeon, she gained an ability called Sharingan, and any man who meets her gaze will fall under her control. The horned woman orders the protagonist to attack. He lunges forward, and Xingxi asks if he's really going to do that. Chen shouts for her to run because he cannot control himself. Xingxi starts running and screaming for help, but suddenly she trips over a rock and falls to the ground, dodging the attack, which, when it hits the wall, shows just how powerful it is. The protagonist keeps trying to attack her, but he resists the command and, with his other hand, stops the attack. The woman keeps trying to force him to attack while laughing, saying that what she likes most is seeing his expression when he eliminates his own companion. To avoid the attack, he attacks himself, leaving the police officer shocked. Chen tells the horned woman that she's greatly underestimating his willpower. Xingxi runs over to him, asking if he is okay. The horned woman keeps mocking them, saying that with just one look between the two of them, she can control him again. That is why he needs to hand his partner over to her. But the protagonist says that if the problem is his eyes, then he just needs to solve the situation. The woman is surprised to see that he has torn out his own eyes. The horned woman says that all men are the same. They let themselves be fooled by beautiful women. But her pupil control technique will not fail. Chen disagrees with her, saying that it does not matter how skilled she is, because without his eyes, he will not be affected by mind control, and that is the weakness of that ability. Xingxi warns him that he is aiming in the wrong direction, but the protagonist explains that he has no choice, since he cannot see anything. However, just from the sound of her movements, the protagonist is able to move toward her. The woman is frightened and starts backing away, asking how a person as strong as him can exist, and apparently she will have to retreat. But as she says that, the protagonist prepares to attack with his long-range ability, saying that her voice gave away her own position. With a precise strike, he manages to hit her, and she remarks that she did not expect to be eliminated by a man. Chen says that he also did not expect tearing out his own eyes to hurt so much. Xingxi runs over to see if he is okay and asks if it is really worth sacrificing his eyes for something like that. The protagonist says that as long as he can save her life, his eyes are a small price to pay. Xingxi comforts him, telling him not to worry because she will take care of him from then on. But the protagonist explains that she does not need to take care of him for the rest of his life, because as soon as the mission ends, if there is no death, the player's body will return to the state it was in before entering the mission. Xingxi gets nervous when she hears that and starts pushing him. The protagonist asks her to let him feel that warm world again, but she keeps pushing him, telling him to give her back her moment of glory. Suddenly, a bullet comes flying toward him and hits his head, leaving the police officer startled again. That shot was fired by the captain of the opposing team, using a level C tracking bullet. The person can fire a tracking bullet, and the farther away the target is, the longer the preparation time required. He gets ready to shoot again, saying that at the current distance, he will need approximately 30 seconds to take that woman's life. Chen starts disappearing in Xingxi's hands, and she becomes desperate for a few seconds, but soon calms down, thinking that this scene feels a little familiar. She starts moving forward while thinking that, based on the trajectory of the wound, the bullet should have been. The captain of the opposing team says again that it is time for the harvest. Xingxi manages to get behind a wall, thinking it must be a safe place, and breathes a sigh of relief, but suddenly notices a bullet coming straight at her. Before she can be hit, a frying pan appears in front of her, causing a small explosion. The protagonist had been reborn once again. However, this time the system charged 500 points for the resurrection, which means the points for each life he regains are increasing, so he needs to use them sparingly. On the other hand, the captain of the enemy team was a little confused, wondering how that was possible because he had clearly eliminated the protagonist. Xingxi starts smiling, seeing that he has been revived again. Chen grabs her hand, telling her to stop talking nonsense, because now is not the time to be happy, since they are in an open area and the enemy is hidden. So, if they are not careful, a few lives will not be enough. The officer questions why the trajectories of the shots are completely opposite, which means there may be more than one shooter. But the protagonist says that is not the case and explains that the enemy must have some ability to control the bullets, and that is why they can launch a sneak attack from anywhere. Xingxi becomes worried, saying that if that is the case, then as long as the enemy does not show himself, they will be completely passive. Chen tells her that everything is fine and asks her to lower her guard a little, because even the most cautious turtle will eventually stick its head out. The enemy captain remained hidden, saying that the protagonist could run wherever he wanted, because the range of the map defined by the system is perfectly within his firing range, so the heavens are helping him, because there is no way to escape. While aiming, he notices that the two are no longer running and wonders if they have gotten tired. The sniper thinks the protagonist is acting like he is indestructible just because he is standing beside a tanker truck. Xingxi asks if the protagonist is sure the enemy will fall for that trick. The enemy captain aims at his target and admits that there is an element of gambling involved, then fires, hitting the tanker truck and causing a huge explosion. He begins mocking them, thinking he has eliminated both of them, because he hopes the items they left behind were not blown into tiny pieces along with them. The two of them come out from inside the sewer drain, and the heavenly scripture experience increases, since the protagonist had lost his arm. Xingxi becomes worried about such a severe injury, but he tries to calm her down, saying that everything is fine, because all of this will be fixed after the mission ends. However, what matters most now is that the two of them are hidden and the enemy is exposed. But Xingxi, who is having trouble breathing because of the smoke, asks what advantage that has, since they cannot see outside. Chen points out that this is not necessarily true and asks to borrow her gun. After that, she needs to lie on the ground and raise her butt high. She gets irritated, saying that at a time like this, he is still making those idiotic jokes. But the protagonist explains that he is not joking, and that if she really wants to defeat the enemy, she needs to do exactly what he is telling her immediately. Not understanding the situation, but having no way to refuse, she ends up agreeing and gets into the position he asked for. He says the position is perfect, and asks her to try to stay that way without moving so that he can shoot. She asks if he is really going to fire with her in that position. Chen says yes, closes his eyes, and concentrates as much as possible, because he really wants to try this new ability he gained after reviving. He activates Eagle Vision. This is a characteristic ability of a legendary master assassin. When used, it can greatly improve vision and perception for a short period of time, and also grants X-ray vision, but excessive use can cause some problems. The protagonist focuses as hard as he can and begins to see the silhouette of his enemy in the middle of the smoke. However, the gun starts shaking because Xing Shi was moving, unable to believe that the protagonist was really using her as a support for the weapon. But he scolds her, telling her not to move, and explains that he has no other choice, since he cannot hold the gun with only one hand. As the smoke begins to clear, the enemy captain sees the two of them and questions how that is possible, how they were not blown to pieces by the explosion. Chen tells the captain not to blink and to enjoy the sight, because it may be the most beautiful thing he will see before he dies. Since there was nothing else he could do, he simply enjoyed the view and was soon hit dead on by the protagonist's shot. But before being eliminated, he says that the color she is wearing is purple, but he prefers white. Chen says the white one is in the washing machine, so he will have to settle for it and rest in peace in his purple fantasy. Xing Shi, who is already irritated by the whole situation, grabs her gun again and points it at the protagonist, asking what purple fantasy he is talking about and whether he really saw her underwear. He tries to defend himself, saying that it is just underwear, and on top of that asks why she is trying to argue with a dead man. Meanwhile, the Catwoman and the teacher were still in the middle of their battle, but the Catwoman had a slight advantage and manages to land a blow, throwing the teacher into one of the buildings. Ouyang is impressed to see that her opponent's brute strength really is very great. The Catwoman releases even more of her power, saying that if that is all her opponent can offer, then she will end it immediately. She fully transforms into a tiger, and just the roar alone creates a terrifying pressure. The teacher realizes that she also needs to increase the degree of her zombie transformation to face her, because the pressure alone is already damaging her body and it hurts. However, she does not know how to provoke herself and starts thinking about things that might make her angry, imagining herself and the protagonist kissing, and the time he also said she was alone on Valentine's Day. With those thoughts, she starts getting irritated. The Catwoman becomes a little confused and asks why her opponent closed her eyes, which must mean she is ready to die. But Ouyang was completely different now. She had transformed. The Catwoman tries to attack her but realizes that the teacher's speed has increased drastically and wonders how that can be possible. The teacher comes out of defensive mode and goes on the attack. The Catwoman realizes that she cannot keep up with her opponent's movements, so there is no way to defend against that attack. She decides to take the attack head-on, but as soon as she is struck by the claws, she begins to suffer from the flames and screams that it is too hot. The teacher returns to normal since with just one strike she was able to finish the fight because the more fur, the weaker to fire, and the ancients really did not lie to her. Chen, who had just arrived at the scene, stands there watching and says that it is a shame to see such a beautiful fur coat being burned. Xing Shi points at the teacher, telling the protagonist that something is wrong. She was remembering that Chen had provoked her, saying that she was nothing more than a beautiful body with no brains. That makes the teacher even angrier, and she starts chasing after him. However, he does not understand why he is being attacked, since this time he had not said anything. Meanwhile, in the library, Xiao Wan was trying to hide, but she kept getting hit. Her opponent was toying with her, asking whether she would prefer to be cut horizontally or vertically. However, he was just playing with his prey, saying that he is not stupid and that it would be better to cut her both ways. But just as the attack comes toward her, something strange happens, and she shouts that it will never happen. Suddenly, she manages to control the webbing of a spider, trapping her opponent's arm. He's surprised, asking if that really is spider silk. Xiao Wan, who had been completely terrified before, now seemed to be controlled by the Spider Queen, toying with her opponent and saying that he is just a praying mantis. The Spider Queen says that even if he is only a praying mantis, that is fine, because he will serve as a test so she can better understand how that woman's body works. She attacks him, causing a small explosion. However, that was not enough to defeat the mantis, who says that he will definitely turn the woman into minced meat. But the Spider Queen says that apparently he still has not understood who the prey is and who the hunter is in there. In a matter of seconds, the mantis is completely trapped in spider silk. She approaches with a terrifying, murderous aura and says that she likes live prey very much because they are all so weak, and he is no exception. She starts feeding, draining all of his life force. However, she is a little disappointed, saying that after tasting the protagonist's flavor, all the other prey seem dull and tasteless. Suddenly, she releases the mantis, saying that the mind of the body's owner is starting to reject her, and apparently, it will take a long time before she can fully control that woman's body. Still, she promises that when that day comes, she will get her revenge on Chen. While she is saying that, the protagonist sneezes, and the officer asks whether he is okay, whether it is possible for people to get sick inside that game. He explains that he does not have a cold and that it is a little strange, however, The most important thing at that moment is finding Xiao Wan. But before they could do anything to look for her, a message appears congratulating the protagonist team, because they had won, and the countdown for exit had already begun. They are surprised to see that the mission has come to an end, but the protagonist could not understand how it ended, because they did not find the healer, and she has no combat power, so there is no way she could have defeated her opponent. They return to the safe zone and the system announces that they successfully exited the dungeon, and all winners received 5,000 experience points. The protagonist is happy to see that his arm has returned, because without balance, he wouldn't know how he would get through the long nights alone. To test his arm, he decides to touch something. Xingshi gets irritated with him and his system notifies that he gained points for courting death. Chen says that his sense of touch is also fine, exactly as it was before, but the police officer also wanted to test his arm and hits him hard, telling him not to test it on her body. Chen asks Xiao Wan if she is okay. Xingshi is also very curious to know how she managed to defeat the opponent. Xiao Wan says she isn't sure either, because she had been chased by that man until not long ago. But when she regained consciousness, she was already back in the safe zone. The protagonist tries to explain, saying that this may have happened because time ran out or because more than half of the opposing side was eliminated, so the system considered their side the winner. Ziling runs to her mother because she was very worried. Xiao Wan asks her daughter what happened and if she is hurt. Ziling explains that she is fine, but the older sister was eliminated. Chen becomes concerned and asks who was eliminated. Sometime later, they go to the cemetery built in the safe zone. A man reads a report saying that, according to the statistics, a total of 13 students died in the last game. They were Zhang Song, Tang Xian, and Dian Qi. The protagonist draws their attention, saying that everyone must have already understood that this is not just a childish game, because if they are not careful, they will die for real. Moreover, if all of them had not been trained, the list of the dead could have been even longer. But one of the boys shouts desperately, saying that those murderers killed his classmates and that he will definitely take revenge on all of them. The protagonist remembers his past life and questions himself about everything he has done, but in the end, understands that eliminating the opponent was only for his own survival. He tells his companions that those of them who are still alive also have blood on their hands because of the relatives and friends of those they eliminated, so they can also be considered villains. The mourning period ends immediately, and instead of remembering those who are gone, everyone should spend more time training their own strength. Therefore, they must try not to become just an object of mourning. Juan places a flower on Dianqi's grave, saying that she truly hopes she can rest in peace. Chen looks at her and says he is very surprised because he never thought she would actually go there to mourn the dead. Juan looks at him and shouts, asking if in his eyes she is still just that cold-blooded, cruel, and opportunistic woman. The protagonist says that it's not just that because she also has large breasts, a small brain, and is fickle and unstable. She asks how he can say that, pointing out that everything he is saying is already too much. Chen holds her hand, saying that a bad woman like her might be the most suitable to survive in that game. And after thinking it over carefully, he came to the conclusion that this is more suitable to stay with her. Juan asks what that is, and the protagonist explains that it is just a trophy for defeating the enemy in the previous battle. That was the eye of the horned woman who tried to control the protagonist, called Charming Eyes Level C. After use, it grants an ocular technique that allows the user to control men through eye contact. The higher the user's charm value, the greater the success rate and effect. Even if a man uses it, he can only control other men. Juan asks why he is giving that to her. The protagonist continues explaining and emphasizes that she is very good at seducing men, and that is what they call specialization. And she is so good that those eyes may not be as effective as she herself is. Juan gets irritated and activates her new ability, saying that in that case, she will not be polite. She tries to use it on the protagonist himself, and he stands still looking at her. Juan still doesn't know whether it worked or not, but the protagonist asks her to give an order, calling her master. Juan is happy to see that she now has an ability that actually works, and says that he must lick between her toes until it is clean, emphasizing that it is an order. The protagonist says he will do as she wishes, but grabs her by the feet and throws her to the ground, telling her to go to hell. Juan, confused, asks why the charming eyes did not work on him. The protagonist laughs, saying he forgot to mention that when this ability is used on a target of a higher level than the user, the success rate is reduced. Juan says he should have told her that before. Chen says goodbye to her, saying she can lick her own toes because he needs to go. 1 week later, the dungeon is called Darkness Before Dawn, and the number of players is 4. The main mission is to complete the mission entrusted by the Dawn organization. A woman says that it seems the people who will form the team for that special mission have just arrived. She introduces herself as the leader of the Dawn organization and also the contact person for that operation. She asks everyone to briefly introduce themselves. A bearded man says his name is Andrew and his nickname is Polar Bear. His ability is Strong Liquor Boost. After drinking strong beverages, he can temporarily increase his abilities. and the higher the alcohol content, the stronger the boost. And if there is a fight, they can leave it to him. A skinny and somewhat shy young man says his name is Liubo, and his ability is mechanical modification. He can create various machines using certain materials, but he's not good at fighting. Xingxi also introduces herself, saying she is a sniper and good at mid and long-range combat. Chen, who is prepared for everything, says he is only good at courting death. Xingxi gets irritated and asks why he is always so slow. The protagonist says that the plan of the day starts in the morning, so she should enjoy every morning with elegance, and that if she is so impatient, she may have irregular menstruation. She replies that hers is very regular. The mission captain walks up to the protagonist, calling him a bastard and tells him to be serious, because that mission is about the future of all humanity. Chen, with his mouth full of liquid, ends up spitting on her, and she becomes a little embarrassed, saying he really dared to spray her. The other two men say he did a good job, and the protagonist says it wasn't his fault because she turned his brain into a smoothie, and he would have gone crazy if he hadn't vomited. She starts cleaning herself, saying that someone as unreliable as him will definitely be forbidden from participating, but suddenly the protagonist changes clothes and asks what she was saying. She finds him very interesting and with a slightly flushed face says that since he is ready, she will start explaining the mission. She opens the system saying that they are currently around Honey City. Due to the leak of the X virus, the entire city has become a dead city full of zombies. The mission is to go to the laboratory located in the center of the city and find an immune body called Light. His DNA is crucial to eliminate the X virus. Liubo gets a little scared, saying it is difficult to rescue someone from a city full of zombies. The captain says they also considered that point. They do not need to take Light out of the city. In fact, they only need to extract blood from the body and bring it back. However, she points out that if they manage to bring the entire body, they will receive even greater rewards. The protagonist raises his hand and she asks if he has any questions. The protagonist says that as an apology, if he manages to complete the mission, he would like to offer to buy her some milk. The captain feels flattered and says that is not impossible. Xingxi gets jealous again and tells the captain that that guy is always like that, asking to start the mission immediately. The protagonist tries to explain that he was just trying to lighten the mood. The captain calls the helicopter and says the operation has officially begun, and the codename is Project Dawn. The protagonist gets excited, but the pilot is not so excited. He says he heard that the X virus can spread through the air, so he wishes everyone good luck. However, when he looks to the side, he notices that the co-pilot is bleeding from the eyes, nose, and mouth. Even so, the helicopter had already left the group to complete the mission. The protagonist comments that that place does not seem very different from the main world, so he wonders if the zombies there will be stronger than normal ones. Andre explains that in his hometown, fighting zombies has become a very popular sport. Liubo is impressed and asks if he is telling the truth because those zombies are very scary. Suddenly, a zombie appears screaming at them, and Liubo hides behind the protagonist saying that it is a Jion date zombie and that they need to leave. Andre prepares for combat, saying there is no need to run after seeing just a few zombies. He asks the protagonist if he is afraid, but the protagonist says no, because no decent person among them is afraid of zombies. The two take the front line, eliminating all the zombies that approach. Liubo is frightened, thinking that his two companions are even scarier than the group of zombies. Xingxi also thinks those two are really incredible, so she does not need to protect them from the shadows. Chen tells Andre that he is also very skilled in wrestling. Andre praises him as well, saying the protagonist is very good at cutting people. They look at each other and Andre asks if he wants to train. The protagonist says that is exactly what he was thinking, but they are on a mission now, so they will do it another day. Xingxi gets even angrier and tells the two to stop acting like children. She says it is time to start the next plan, when he says that logically they should go to the laboratory, but he has no idea which is the correct path. Chen shouts that in moments like this, they have to use the ancestral method of the Wei family to find directions. Xingxi keeps scolding him, telling him to stop acting like that. The protagonist walks up to her, gently lifts one of her legs, and starts removing her boot. Xingxi gets a little embarrassed, asking what he's planning to do because there are other people around. Chen takes the boot, spins it very fast, and throws it forward. It lands perfectly on the ground, and the protagonist says the shoe is pointing in that direction, so they need to go there. Andre is impressed, saying that is the mysterious power of the East, but Liubo says he does not remember such a power existing in the East. Xingxi kicks the protagonist, asking what kind of ancestral method of finding direction that is, and shouts that it is nothing more than throwing a shoe. The protagonist says he was joking. Liubo says that if he gets enough materials, he can build a machine to guide them. Xingxi says that is perfect, because there is a large market just ahead. They should be able to find the materials he needs and also gather some supplies. Liubo gets a little worried because that place is full of zombies, and going in to get supplies seems very dangerous. The protagonist asks the officer to stay there and protect the young boy while he and Andre go get the supplies. Andre gets very excited because he wants to find some free vodka to drink. Liubo gets a little upset and complains, asking why they would leave a woman to protect him. Xingxi feels offended and calls the boy Four Eyes. She points the gun at him and he gets even more scared, asking what she is doing. But the officer simply fires and hits a zombie that was behind him. She walks up to him and asks if he really just called her weak. The boy, completely frightened, says no and apologizes. Meanwhile, inside the supermarket, a zombie was distracted with a magazine, and the protagonist takes the opportunity to eliminate it easily. Chen comments that even if it is a zombie, students should not read things like that, so he will confiscate it in the name of the teacher. Andri, who is searching the shelves, shouts saying there is a lot of alcohol there and asks if he wants him to grab some bottles, asking if he prefers vodka or whiskey. Chen says he prefers to drink only water and takes the list Liubo had made, realizing there is a lot they need to carry. While looking for lubricant, he ends up stepping on a rubber chicken, making a sound that attracts some zombies. Andri tells him not to worry because he will handle everything, uncorks 2 bottles of vodka and drinks them straight. He activates his ability, and it seems someone had already shown how it works. The protagonist cannot understand how someone can fight while so drunk and questions whether that can be reliable. Suddenly, the zombies rush toward Andri, and the protagonist is startled, but Andri dodges easily. In just 1 second, he immobilizes one of the zombies that tried to attack him. Chen thinks that although it looks chaotic, there is a pattern in his movements, and if he can incorporate those steps and movements into his swordsmanship. The system then notifies that a sudden enlightenment of the host has been detected. Chen is surprised, asking if something that good really exists. The system appears and says, that is the 8 Immortals Drunken Blade technique, level B. Drinking in form but not in mind, drinking in steps but not in heart. The blade technique is elusive and catches opponents off guard. It has 8 forms, and its power increases when the user is intoxicated. One of the zombies tries to attack him from behind, but the protagonist notices and reacts quickly, managing to eliminate it. Andri, who had already cleared the front, says the protagonist's swordsmanship improved a lot, but he ends up falling asleep. The protagonist shouts trying to wake him up, but he remains lying down, saying that after that cup, there are still 3 left. The protagonist tries to hit him to wake him up, but nothing works. A few hours later, already at night, Xingxi had made a small campfire and was upset, since the protagonist was taking so long that she was starving. Liubo says they are back, and the protagonist, who is carrying everything including Andri, asks someone to help him. As soon as he arrives at the camp, he throws himself on the ground completely exhausted and asks if those materials are enough. Liubo says yes and asks them to wait a few hours because he will definitely be able to make something very useful. Chen says he does not need to rush because they have already cleared that entire area and now it is very safe so they can eat something before starting. They put the food in the pot and take it to the fire, and Xingxi, like a true food addict, was almost jumping into it. In addition, he also brought some drinks for the whole group. Liubo falls to the ground, telling them to drink more, and the protagonist starts laughing, saying he is already drunk after just 1 can and that is why he is a loser. Xingxi says Liubo is just a coward. She comments that the protagonist seems much braver, and he asks if she is joking because he is super brave. He says he has something very good and asks if she wants to see it. The officer asks if it is a new weapon, but the protagonist just grabs her arm and asks her to follow him. She gets a little scared and asks if he is planning to do that, but the protagonist says she will see when they get there because it is very cool. They move a little away from the group and the protagonist says it is fine there and they need to start because he can hardly wait to show his thing. He touches her shoulder and she asks if it is right there. He says yes. She points to the tent ahead, saying they should at least go inside it, but the protagonist says the tent is too small and he cannot move properly. Xingxi also wants to, but is embarrassed. She says they do not know each other very well, so maybe it is better to get to know each other a bit more. The protagonist asks what she is talking about because he brought her there to show the new abilities he just mastered. She is surprised and embarrassed at the same time, asking if it is just to see his abilities. Chen makes some movements and says that is right because he really wants to test his newly understood sword technique to cut bullets. But Xingxi was already holding her weapon because she was very eager. He looks at her and says she can use the pistol. With a bloodthirsty look, she points it at him, saying it will be a pleasure to see if he can really cut bullets. Chen prepares and says she can start. She grabs her M4 and asks if he is really ready and starts firing, but the protagonist just starts running, asking where she got that while she keeps shooting and telling him not to run. The next day, Andri wakes up saying he slept very well, but Chen was almost dead. Andri is surprised and asks why he looks so exhausted and if he did some kind of group training the night before. The protagonist says that is not the case and points to the officer, saying she shot him a lot all night while she keeps provoking him. Andri asks if he was really the one who got shot and says their relationship is a bit strange. The protagonist says he is misunderstanding everything, but Liubo interrupts and shouts that his navigation robot is finally ready. Chen looks at the robot and says that somehow it looks a bit obscene, asking what the tech genius based it on. Liubo says it only looks yellow because he is wearing yellow glasses. and that it is a very suitable navigation robot called Just Go. Xingxi looks at the small robot and says it is not obscene, but very cute. Liubo shouts for her to stop hugging it like that because the robot cannot get close to women. She's confused and asks why not, but Just Go looks at certain parts, saying exploration has begun, and jumps into her chest. She is surprised, pulls the robot out, asking what it thinks it is doing, and bends it in half. The three men feel as if they were also bent. She throws Just Go on the ground, and Liubo says he does not really know why, but all the robots he makes, although they work very well, are perverted. The protagonist comments that maybe the robot is just following its master, and that maybe he is also a pervert. Liubo says that is not true and tells Just Go to show what it can do. Chen asks Xingxi if the robot can really navigate, and she says that somehow she feels it is not reliable. Andre, however, is very excited, saying the power of science is really incredible. Just Go starts spinning from side to side and soon falls to the ground, saying they should move forward. Everyone is a little disappointed, and Xingxi shouts at Liubo, asking how that is different from throwing a shoe to get directions. Liubo asks her to calm down because he will explain. He says he installed a magnetic field induction system in the robot's head, and it can accurately find the direction of the destination. The protagonist questions whether he really spent all that time to make a compass that likes pointing to oil. Xingxi keeps asking if the robot is reliable. Chen says the system usually does not match teammates with a large difference in overall strength, so if he is weak in combat, he probably has special talents in other areas. Liubo says that although he is not a good fighter, they need to trust that his robot will certainly lead them to the destination. 2 hours later, Xingxi says that is the destination the navigation robot brought them to and asks why it is a maid cafe. Just Go looks at the woman and jumps at her, saying that is the destination. Xingxi grabs it and starts twisting it, asking if there is really any point in keeping a perverted robot because she needs to destroy it. Liubo asks her to let go, and the protagonist intervenes, asking her to wait a moment and pointing ahead, asking if that is not the laboratory since it is right next to the maid cafe. Liubo tries to remove the robot that was stuck to the poster and asks them to let go because they need to leave. He finally manages to free the robot, which falls to the ground, but 2 zombie maids come running after him. Chen asks him to wait a moment and questions why so much panic, pointing out that there are many zombies around, so fighting could attract a horde. So they need to go straight into the laboratory. The group agrees and runs to the lab. The door was locked and the protagonist tries to punch it open, but his hand hurts. He gets even more irritated and keeps hitting the door, saying that if whoever is locking it from inside has the courage, they should come out of the system and open it. Liubo finds a small computer and asks him to stop hitting it, because that building must have an autonomous defense system. To enter from the outside, it is necessary to activate the door opening procedure through the terminal. Xingxi asks if he can speak like a normal person, at least for now. Liubo starts working on the computer and says he will probably be able to crack the program, asking everyone to protect him for a while. The zombie maids were approaching, and Xingxi says Liubo can focus on opening the door because they will handle the rest. Andre uncorks 2 bottles and says that although he does not hit women, the situation is a bit different because zombie women should no longer count as women. But Chen steps in front of them, saying that unfortunately they cannot fight, because if they attract a horde of zombies, they will not be able to handle it. The officer asks what they should do. Chen opens the system and says he has already thought of a way to defeat the zombie maids without fighting. Xingxi is even more impressed seeing his strategy, and Andre says he really came up with something interesting. The protagonist then transforms completely, wearing an elegant outfit and with impeccable hair. He calls all the maids, saying they should come see their master. The zombie maids become enchanted, saying they would like to serve him. They all run to him and Chen tells them not to rush, because he has enough for everyone. Some maids start feeding him fried rice with worm eggs and special coffee with the corpse oil. He thinks that if he does not eat anything, the zombie maids will definitely get angry, and concludes that if he is not going to hell, then no one will. He takes some of the food and tastes it. Xingxi thinks it is disgusting, but Andre thinks the protagonist is a real man. Xingxi gets worried and asks Liubo if he still cannot open the door because if it takes too long, the protagonist might die from poisoning. Liubo says the decryption program has started loading, and a few seconds later, the system informs that the door will open, beginning to move. The protagonist, who is almost dying from intoxication, comments that it is even more disgusting than the food old Chen makes. One of the maids approaches, saying she would love to give the master a kiss to show all her love. But suddenly her head opens and turns into a huge mouth. At that moment, the maid gets shot and starts being eliminated. This time, Xingxi's jealousy saved him. She says she is sorry for interrupting the service he was having with the maids. Chen replies that if she had not appeared, he might have been devoured right there. The other maids also transform, saying she is a bad woman who must be eliminated because the master belongs to them. The protagonist draws his sword and says their service was very good, so he will give a 5-star review, but they will need to check it in hell. Quickly, he cuts down all the maids around him, but Liubo shouts that he needs to go now because the door will only stay open for 30 seconds. He gets annoyed seeing there is not much time left to play and grabs Xingshu's arm, saying it is time to go. However, while running toward the door, he comments that it is strange because the touch does not feel so pleasant. When he looks back, he realizes he was holding one of the zombie maids. She asks the master to take her along, but Chen is just surprised. Xingshi cannot believe she came all the way to save him and he mistook her for a zombie, so she decides he needs to be eliminated. She starts shooting at him again. Chen comments that she is more dangerous than a horde of zombies. He starts running into the lab, but she runs after him, telling him to stop. Xingshi jumps and lands a kick on his back, and the door closes right after. Chen rolls on the floor in pain, and Liubo thinks that must hurt a lot. Andre asks if that is the legendary prostate break. Xingshi says that idiot deserved the punishment. Chen says it was an emergency and he did not do it on purpose. But the most important thing now is to hurry to complete the mission and find the target. Liubo says the lab is deserted, and the defense mechanisms are still active, so everyone must be more careful and not trigger any traps. Chen tells him not to worry and says he is very cautious. As long as he shows the way, everything will be fine. But he ends up stepping on a trap and says it seems the flag was collected too early. The alarm goes off saying intruders have been detected and must be executed immediately, and the clear command will be carried out. Chen advances quickly and cuts one of the robot's weapons. Andre also jumps into action and engages in close combat. Chen tells Xingshi to protect Liubo and leave the fight to them, but she refuses, telling him to stop treating her like a babysitter, and starts firing at the robot, telling Four Eyes to stay back. Liubo says not to underestimate him because he already added combat functions to Just Go. He tells the robot to stand up and enter vibration mode. Preparing for combat, he says he will show the power of science and lands a hit from behind on the enemy robot. He explains that using high-intensity vibrations to directly destroy the internal circuit system is easier. Chen comments that although it was impressive, it still seems very perverted. Xingshi says she often feels out of place with them because she is not crazy enough. But Liubo keeps saying he is not a pervert. The protagonist takes the opportunity and finishes the robot, chopping it into several pieces. Xingshi says everything is finally resolved, but Andre points out that fighting robots is very boring because he still prefers the feeling of breaking the opponent's nose with his own fists. Liubo says that even Just Go ran out of energy, but Chen asks if he is sure about that. Xingshi walks up to a door and says it seems it can only be accessed through scanning an ID card. Liubo asks them to check the control receivers of that robot because they might find something useful. Chen says the control receiver should be there and approaches to grab it. Liubo touches the protagonist's shoulder, asking him not to touch it directly with his hands, otherwise, but it was already too late and both start getting shocked. He tells the protagonist to put on rubber gloves and carefully reach for the device. The protagonist manages to grab the receiver and goes to the door. The system verifies the identity and informs that the access channel is open, but they must enter and exit as quickly as possible. As soon as they enter, they are surprised, asking why that room is completely empty. The protagonist points out that the room was designed in a very open way, and there was probably some kind of trap there. Xingshi comments that aside from the four walls and a control panel, there was nothing else inside the room. The protagonist replies that someone as meticulous as him would never fall into a trap. The policewoman then asks if he really still had the courage to say that, while his hair was exploding with electricity. Chen grabs one comb for himself and another for Liubo, saying that it had only been an accident. Liubo orders his robot to go to the control panel since it was smaller and had less chance of being hit by some trap. The little robot complains that it was not that small, but its creator tries to comfort it and orders it to go immediately. As soon as the robot advances, a voice appears, saying that an intruder has been detected, and because of that, Annihilation Defense Mode has been activated. The protagonist comments that it would probably be lasers again, and that was not original at all. The policewoman becomes worried and asks what they should do, because it looked dangerous. Liubo tells them not to worry, saying that the robot had an integrated evasion system, and dodging those lasers would not be a problem at all. However, within seconds, the robot is completely destroyed, leaving its creator devastated. Xingshi looks at Andre and Chen and asks what was going on with them. The protagonist replies that it was just a slight sadness, but she says that it was not the time for jokes because the lasers were increasing and they probably would not be able to endure for much longer. The protagonist begins to move forward slowly. Liubo tries to say something, but the policewoman tells him not to worry. Even though the protagonist did not seem trustworthy, he really was. The mad scientist then says that his head disappeared. Xingshi looks ahead and realizes that the protagonist really was missing his head, becoming completely shocked. Liubo jumps onto Andre, asking where Chen's head was. The protagonist falls to the ground and Xingshi lifts him up, telling him to stop with those jokes. Chen starts laughing and tells them not to be so worried because he was only joking. Xingshi grabs her gun and asks if he really did not know when to joke. She starts shooting at him, saying that since he loved dying so much, she would help him a little. Chen dodges the shots and asks her to spare his life. Andre shouts for him to be careful because something was coming from behind him. As soon as he looks back, Chen sees countless lasers coming toward him and questions how he could avoid them. He activates his ability and asks how a mere laser dared to show off in front of an expert. His body changes drastically, becoming much more muscular than before. That was the powerful celestial dragon, Ksitigarbha, honored by the world, Prajna Buddhas Prajna Paramita Hung, the indestructible pure yang body. The lasers hit his body, but nothing happens. Andre is impressed and says that now the protagonist had become a real man. Liubo also comments that he was very powerful. The two of them shout for him to keep going because he was almost there. Chen continues walking and finally reaches the command center. He thinks that destroying it might block the lasers, although he still felt a lot of pain when being hit. The rest of the group becomes worried because the laser's range was increasing more and more and was already reaching them. Liubo shouts for Chen to use the control panel immediately to deactivate the trap. The protagonist looks back and says that even as a mad scientist, Liubo had no idea how to operate that panel. Liubo cannot believe what he has just heard. Xingxi dodges the lasers and tells the protagonist to quickly use his invincible death-seeking heart to find a solution. Chen draws his sword and says that there was only one thing left to do. He attacks the computer, saying that he just had to use his own method. The laser gets very close to the policewoman, but it is deactivated at the last second. The protagonist's body returns to normal and he starts laughing, saying that this was only to be expected from himself. However, Xingxi was furious and slaps him across the face, saying that her bangs had been cut and were now ruined. Chen holds her hand and asks what was more important, her bangs or her own life. The computer begins to short-circuit and the protagonist continues talking to the policewoman, saying that he saved her life and she should thank him first. She agrees and thanks him. Chen continues comforting her, saying that her bangs would grow back and that a new hairstyle might not be so bad. However, the last laser begins to approach. Xingxi agrees and holds her own hair, saying that a new hairstyle was not out of the question, so after the mission ended, he would need to take her to get her hair fixed. The protagonist agrees, but suddenly she notices something horrible. The laser had hit the protagonist's arm. Xingxi quickly draws her gun and finishes destroying the computer. The door begins to open and she looks at the protagonist, saying that his arm had been torn off. Chen starts shouting that the power of his king had been taken from him, but the policewoman tells him to stop barking, because it was not the first time he had lost his own arm. Chen replies that this was not the problem because there would still be battles ahead and he could only recover after the mission ended. So how was he supposed to help like that? Liubo tears his own shirt and starts knocking several things over while laughing, saying that he had already predicted something like this might happen. That was why he had collected the parts left behind by the robot guards. He asks everyone to wait just 1 minute, because he would do it immediately. Liubo begins to assemble his new creation meticulously, and the protagonist asks if he was making another strange robot again. Even Xingxi admits that she had no idea what that boy was creating. A short while later, the mad scientist announces that it was a mechanical arm made especially for the protagonist, and that he had decided to call it Man's Best Helper. Chen asks if he really could not come up with a more normal name. Liubo changes the subject and says that now they needed to perform the natural graft, and it would be very painful, so he asks the protagonist to endure it. Chen replies that it was fine, because he already had an anesthetic ready. Then he asks Xingxi to come a little closer. She becomes confused and asks why she was being called since there was no anesthetic at all. Chen holds her by the head and says that in truth she was his anesthetic. She becomes embarrassed and asks what he's going to do. The protagonist simply starts kissing her. Liubo takes advantage of the situation to attach the mechanical arm while the two of them were kissing. As soon as the arm is attached, Xingxi turns completely red and complains that he was going too far by using a girl's kiss as anesthetic. The protagonist apologizes and says that it was very painful, so only she could make him temporarily endure all that pain. Xingxi, still red and awkward, replies that she should not spare him. However, if it really hurt that much, then she would let him be satisfied that time. Chen thanks her, saying that she was the best. She then warns that she would only let that happen that time and asks him never to repeat it again. Chen rests his head on the best pillow in the world and enjoys the moment. Suddenly, an alarm goes off announcing that a defense system had been destroyed, and because of that, the laboratory would self-destruct in 10 minutes. They needed to evacuate immediately. Liubo comments that he should have imagined that already and says that maybe he should have put a self-destruct device in that mechanical arm too. Andre complains, saying that he was very irritated with the whole situation. Xingxi asks what was going on and why there was a self-destruct system in that place. Liubo replies that there was no time to deactivate the destruction sequence, so they needed to find the target immediately and get out of there as quickly as possible. The group starts running desperately to complete the mission. A little farther ahead, they find a locked door and conclude that the target was probably inside that room. As soon as they open the door, they realize that there were several bodies inside the place. Everyone is shocked and says that it seemed like a joke, because it would be practically impossible to discover which one was the real target among so many bodies. Liubo explains that it was not that complicated because the captain had said that the target was the only immune body. Andre remains confused and asks why there were so many bodies there, and whether they were all immune too. The protagonist explains that there was only one true immune body. The rest were test subjects used in experiments with the zombie virus for comparison. This makes him angry because those people were experimenting on living humans. Suddenly, the containers holding the bodies begin to break and the bodies fall to the ground. Andre asks the protagonist what they should do now. Chen replies that there was only one option. The bodies begin to transform into zombies. Chen prepares to attack and comments that, with so many infected, it would be almost impossible to find the real target. He begins destroying all the infected in front of him, but massive explosions start going off and the entire base begins to collapse. Liubo warns that they did not have much time, and that if they did not evacuate soon, they would end up buried there. The protagonist tells everyone to leave immediately, because he would search for the target alone. Then, he activates Eagle Eye. Since the zombies' hearts had stopped, he only needed to use his X-ray vision to find someone whose heart was still beating normally. However, in the middle of the search, he ends up seeing something even more eye-catching: underwear with strawberry patterns. Xingxi becomes completely embarrassed and asks how he managed to see that. The protagonist apologizes and explains that his X-ray vision was still not properly adjusted. He then concentrates and improves his vision. Finally, he manages to observe the hearts and realizes that now he only needed to find the test subject whose heart was still beating normally. Soon, he finds a poor girl hidden at the back of the room, completely terrified. She hears a noise and looks back, but the moment she turns around, a zombie appears right in front of her, ready to attack. The protagonist launches his flying blade and eliminates the zombie before it can touch her. The girl crouches down again, trembling in fear because of that whole situation. The protagonist tries to calm her and stretches his hand toward her. The girl slowly opens her eyes and sees the protagonist smiling as he says that he was there to pick her up. The moment she stands up, a huge explosion goes off. Liubo shouts for the protagonist to get out of there immediately. However, the escape route was already blocked by debris. Chen asks what he should do now while the girl just trembles in fear. Liubo then warns him that he had installed a grappling hook in the robotic arm. Chen raises his finger and asks why the mad scientist had not told him earlier about such an incredible function. But suddenly, the arm starts saying strange things, saying that Sister Lee was unexpectedly pregnant and asking what she should do. Another voice replies that they should immediately go to the hospital, find the director, perform the surgery, and return to work the next day. The protagonist becomes completely confused and asks what the hell that was. Liubo explains that it was a special transmission device he had installed in the arm. The arm then detaches and stretches outward, making Chen question why he always installed such useless functions. Before being pulled out, he looks at the girl and says that if she was scared, she just had to close her eyes. The hand manages to latch onto the upper part, and the protagonist escapes the rubble in great style. The explosions continue growing stronger as he runs quickly out of the base. A few seconds later, the entire place is destroyed. The protagonist looks back and comments that if he had arrived a few seconds later, everyone would have turned into ashes. However, Xingxi, full of jealousy, asks how long he intended to keep holding that girl. Chen replies that the girl was not like Xingxi, because she was so light that he even forgot he was carrying someone. Xingxi becomes furious and asks if he was calling her fat. The protagonist tries to fix the situation, saying that was not what he meant. Then he tells everyone to focus on what mattered, because now they only had to take that maiden away and the mission would be complete. Liubo asks them to wait a moment because he had an objection. He questions whether the protagonist really believed they could get out of that city while carrying that burden. Then he grabs his sword and says that, according to the captain, they only needed the girl's DNA. Next, he tries to attack her. The protagonist immediately steps in front of the girl to protect her and grabs the mad scientist's hand, asking what he thought he was doing. Liubo replies that taking that girl would be much more dangerous than carrying only a bag of blood samples. After all, the next stages of the mission would be even more difficult, so they could not take her with them. Chen asks if he was really planning to abandon that little girl there to die. Xingxi points out that bringing a person back would certainly earn them even more rewards. Liubo tells Chen to look carefully because that girl was only an NPC, a pile of lifeless data, and asks if he was really willing to let the entire team die because of unnecessary pity. Chen looks at Weiright and thinks that Liubo was actually right. That girl was not a real person, only a character created by the instance. However, she clings to him, saying that she wanted to live. The protagonist holds the girl and smiles, saying that she really was only an NPC. Then he holds her hand and states that he had already made his decision. He would take her with him and would be the only one responsible for protecting her. However, for safety, he would first take a blood sample just to make sure. He hands the blood to Liubo and asks if he could agree that way. Liubo holds the sample and comments that if he said what he really thought, everyone would think he was too cold-blooded. The protagonist replies that it was not that and states that Liubo's decision was not wrong. In that situation, carrying a defenseless burden really was dangerous, and this time he had acted on impulse. Andri joins the conversation saying that it was fine because now that they had the blood sample, they only needed to reach the escape point, and that would be a piece of cake. Suddenly, an extremely loud noise echoes throughout the entire place. The ground itself begins to shake, and the protagonist asks what was happening. Xingxi says that maybe it was an earthquake. However, a huge monster soon appears before them. That creature was a B-rank fused zombie, a symbiote accidentally formed that constantly absorbed new zombies to strengthen itself. It was an extremely dangerous creature. Liubo becomes frightened and asks how that was possible, because the explosion should have eliminated all the zombies in the area. Chen explains that among those test subjects, there might have been some special existence, and the explosion only made their fusion easier. Besides, they were no match for that monster, so they needed to run immediately. The monster tries to attack Xingxi, but the protagonist manages to pull her out of danger in time. She feels protected, but is shocked to see that the ground had been completely split apart by that blow. The monster keeps destroying everything around it while charging forward madly. Andri notices that the crazy scientist was in danger and runs to help him while Liubo screams desperately that the monster was coming. The protagonist throws a rock at the mutant zombie's head and draws its attention, saying that there were prettier things around there. Xingxi asks if he really thought that creature could be interested in beauty. However, the mutant zombie immediately turns its attention to the officer. She becomes annoyed and asks why it was staring at her like that, as if she were a teapot. Chen holds Wyrite in his arms and says that first they needed to lure that monster away. After that, they would try to find an opportunity to regroup. Andri asks where they would meet. The protagonist points to a nearby Ferris wheel and tells everyone to go there as soon as possible. During the night, in the amusement park, something was walking slowly while singing. A zombie clown was terrorizing the place, but suddenly the mutant monster appears and absorbs it too. The protagonist, who was observing everything from on top of a boat, comments that the creature was constantly devouring its own kind, and the more it ate, the stronger it became. If that continued, it could even rise to A rank. Xingxi loses hope and asks if they were doomed. Chen tries to calm her and tells her not to worry because there was no need to provoke the monster. They just needed to get out of there as quickly as possible. Xingxi replies that even if they ignore that giant, just making Wyrite cross through the middle of the zombies would already be extremely difficult. Wyrite becomes even more depressed and says that all of that was her fault because she was only a burden. Xingxi realizes what she had just said and quickly tries to correct herself, stating that she did not mean that. She guarantees that as long as they found a path, they would definitely be able to reach their destination. The protagonist also tries to comfort the girl, saying that as long as he was there, he would find a way to solve everything. Chen explains that during the night, the zombies' vision became greatly reduced, but in exchange, their hearing and sense of smell became much sharper. Wyrite comments that this was terrifyingly dangerous. Suddenly, a zombie tries to attack her, and she screams in fear, asking for help. Xingxi fires a precise shot at the zombie to save her, but soon realizes that she had made a mistake, because the sound of the gunshot attracted several other zombies. Chen holds a piece of blade and states that now there was only one path. The next method might be a little extreme. He cuts open one of the zombies and spreads that slime over the girls. The two complain, saying that it was disgusting, sticky, and extremely uncomfortable. The protagonist tells them to stop complaining and start acting like zombies too. The group begins walking slowly among the undead. Xingxi asks if that method learned from American dramas would really work. The protagonist tells her not to worry and asks since when he had ever done anything to harm her. Xingxi tries to reassure Wyrite and tells her to act like a zombie too. However, the girl was almost freezing from fear. The protagonist apologizes, saying that maybe he should not have forced her like that. Xingxi looks to the side and asks why she felt like one of those zombies was staring at her. The undead slowly begins to approach, and she covers her own breasts, asking why that was happening. Maybe that area had not been properly covered with zombie blood and she had been discovered. Chen throws even more zombie blood over her and says that it was fine because he had already predicted that situation. Then he holds Xingxi and rubs his face against her breast to get even more zombie smell. While doing that, he thinks that it was an extraordinary feeling. The zombie smells it and ends up leaving. Xingxi punches Chen and asks if he simply could not have used his hands. At that moment, the mutant monster finishes devouring other zombies and starts approaching the group. Xingxi holds her gun and asks what they should do now. Chen replies that if they ran, they would definitely attract the attention of all the zombies around them. Other undead begin to appear behind them. Xingxi still does not know what to do, so the protagonist pushes a zombie toward the mutant. The monster grabs the zombie and throws it directly into its own body. Xingxi is surprised and asks if that had really worked. Chen says that it did not matter whether it worked or not because it was better for a zombie to be devoured than for them to be. Besides, the zombies were already dead anyway, so it made no difference. If they kept feeding that big guy, they would be safe for now. Xingshi also starts throwing zombies to feed the monster. However, Wayrite ends up bumping into a zombie and automatically apologizes. The zombie prepares to grab her, but the protagonist quickly appears and kicks it in the head, sending the undead flying away. Chen holds Wayrite and asks if she is okay, saying that it looked like she had even lost 2 strands of hair and that hurt his heart. The girl replies that she was fine and that he did not need to worry. Then they throw a fat zombie to the monster, which devours it quickly. Xingshi asks what they should do now since they had run out of zombies to feed the big guy. Chen tells her not to worry because this was the perfect moment. Xingshi asks what he was talking about, but the protagonist starts approaching the monster while asking if it had enjoyed eating those stinking zombies and if it knew the feeling of true rot. As he spoke, he sprayed something over his own body. The monster grabs the protagonist and Xingshi, along with Wayrite, becomes desperate after seeing that. Chen thinks that this was the ideal moment and opens a bottle of medicine. It was a powerful C-rank emetic, costing 100 points. Just 1 pill caused an instant effect. The more someone consumed, the more they would vomit. It was a perfect item for cleaning the intestines and removing toxins. The mutant monster ends up swallowing all the capsules at once and immediately begins vomiting violently, throwing the protagonist away. The girls find it extremely disgusting, but thanks to the vomit, Chen manages to escape. He shouts for them to run immediately because ordinary weapons could not injure that monster. At most, they could temporarily delay it. Once it got used to the vomiting, it would already be too late. Xingshi replies that even if he had not said anything, they would already be running. However, Chen asks her to wait because he had not gotten into the water yet. Xingshi becomes irritated and tells him not to come near her like that since he was completely disgusting. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Andri and the mad scientist were facing some zombies. Liubo comments that they needed to get out of there immediately because new zombies would arrive soon. Andri downs a bottle of beer in one go and says that even if twice as many zombies appeared, he would still fight them all. Liubo notices something strange and tells Andri to look at his own arm because it seemed like he had been bitten. Andri replies that he was probably caught off guard during the previous fight. Suddenly, his arms begin to tremble and he comments that he was feeling extremely strange. His eyes turn red and his expression begins to change. Liubo asks if he was okay, but Andri pushes his hand away and tells the scientist not to come closer because he could end up turning into a zombie too. Then he hands his weapon to Liubo and asks him to end it quickly before something worse happens. Andri realizes that the mutation was advancing far too quickly and tells the scientist to do it immediately because if he was going to die, he would rather die with honor. Liubo hesitates but says that he will shoot. 3 months earlier, Liubo was trapped and asking for help. Some people appear and start mocking him, saying that a useless person like him would still be worthless, even if he was saved. One of the men then says that he could be kind enough to end his suffering. He picks up a gun and says that there was no need to thank him. Liubo trembles in fear and begs not to die that way. The man fires, but the shot only grazes his face. The others start laughing, saying that he almost peed his pants. The guy then states that the next shot would be real. However, when he tries to shoot again, the gun jams. Irritated, he throws the gun to his companion and says that it was useless. The two simply leave, abandoning Liubo to die alone. A short while later, Liubo hears a voice saying that it was very hungry. When he looks back, he sees a zombie slowly crawling toward him. Liubo panics and asks if he was really going to die like that. Then he grabs his sword and decides that he refused to be eliminated there. Back in the present, Liubo applies a substance to Andri's body. He asks what that was. Liubo explains that it was Wayrite's blood and that it should be able to eliminate the zombie virus. Andri is surprised and asks if that was not precisely the mission's trump card. If Chen failed to protect Wayrite, then the entire mission would be a complete failure. Liubo replies that the system would never pair companions with very different levels, so the protagonist's strength was reliable. Besides, he did not want to be a scumbag like those people who abandoned others to die. Trusting one's companions could create great miracles in the future. Andri becomes a little confused and asks who he was talking about and what kind of miracle that was. Maybe it was just mysterious Eastern language. He then comments that his body seemed a little better, although he was still powerless. Suddenly, more zombies begin to approach. Andri shouts that there was still a zombie that had escaped. Liubo immediately advances and says that he also had his own trump card. Then he lands an extremely powerful kick on the zombie. Andri is impressed and realizes that it was a mechanical leg. Liubo replies that a true genius of technology should never be underestimated. Meanwhile, at the amusement park, Chen was enjoying a bath inside a children's pool and saying that he was finally clean. Xingshi throws a rubber duck at him and tells him to get dressed immediately before entering the water. She asks why they needed to bathe specifically in the children's area of the park. The protagonist explains that it was the only place with clean water because he did not want to hit the road covered in vomit. However, he soon looks around and realizes that Wayrite was no longer there. The policewoman explains that she told the girl to play alone for a while, otherwise she would end up seeing something inappropriate. Wayrite then comes back holding a book in her hands and points to a photo, saying that the man was her father and the woman was her mother. The protagonist comments that she really was a very unlucky girl and asks if that meant she had recovered her memories of her family. However, Wewright lowers her head a little sadly and replies that she still could not remember anything. Xingxi hugs the girl and says that she was still very young but had already gone through far too many terrifying things. She holds the protagonist's arm, calling him daddy, and then holds Xingxi's arm, saying that she was mommy, smiling happily. Chen tells Wewright that it was fine and that she did not need to worry because he would protect her as if she were his own daughter. However, Xingxi asks them to wait a minute and starts reasoning out loud. If the protagonist was the father and she was the mother, then before she could finish the sentence, Chen holds her face and says that there was no problem if she did not want to be the mother. She could also be the daughter, and he would take very good care of her. Xingxi stomps hard on his foot and tells him to stop trying to take advantage of the situation. Even so, she becomes thoughtful and questions whether it was really right to hand that little girl over to the organization. Chen explains that the organization wanted to use her immunity to research a vaccine, so they would certainly ensure the girl's safety. Because of that, they did not need to worry so much. The group begins walking through a toy store, and the protagonist comments that they had already finished cleaning themselves up, so now they needed to act quickly because there might not be much time left. Suddenly, Xingxi hears a strange sound and comments that it sounded like a child crying. She looks toward a corner of the store and sees a small child there. Then she begins to approach. However, Chen shouts for her not to get close. The instant Xingxi touches the child, it turns around, revealing that it was a zombie, and immediately bites the policewoman's arm. Xingxi shoots the zombie to save herself, but she had already been bitten. She panics, asking if she was going to turn into a zombie and die. Chen holds her by the shoulders and tells her to calm down, saying that there had to be some solution. Xingxi lowers her gaze and little by little begins to lose control. Soon after, she ends up biting Chen. Wewright becomes frightened, saying that he had been bitten too, but the protagonist lets Xingxi keep biting him and drinking his blood while saying that it was fine. He explains that he had uninfected blood, so the virus would have no effect on him. Besides, as long as Xingxi kept drinking his blood, she would not transform either. Sometime later, Xingxi was still feeding and the protagonist was already completely exhausted, asking if she still had not finished because there was almost no blood left in his body. However, the zombie virus still seemed active inside her. The protagonist holds Xingxi down on the floor and wonders if it was possible that his bloodline was not strong enough against that virus. At that moment, Wewright lightly cuts her own arm and says that her blood could save mommy. She brings her arm close to Xingxi's mouth and asks her to open her mouth and drink everything. Xingxi begins to consume the girl's blood and slowly returns to normal. When she regains consciousness, she asks what had happened. The protagonist explains that if it had not been for Wewright's blood, she would have turned into a violent zombie. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new content. Thank you.